Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm a fan of classic movies.
During the spookiest time of the year, there are a few guidelines all ghosts and goblins should follow. Always stay on sidewalks. Never go to a stranger's house. And never go out alone.
I'm the boogeyman! And I'm coming to get you!
You know nothing of hell.
Here, Flicker.
I'm tired of living in fear.
I'm back.
New to the neighborhood.
Trick or treat!
Trick or treat!
If you are thinking of seeing this film alone, don't.
Julia, let's get this show on the road.
Hello and welcome to Overlapping Dialogue, a podcast of audio commentaries dedicated to discussing cinema that fascinates us in a way we hope fascinates you. We're your co-hosts, Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Levi.
And here we are for our final edition of Spooktober Spooktacular. Our fifth film in the month of October that's Halloweenish and or horror themed.
Yeah, it's interesting it's already Halloween. The year's gone by really quickly anyway, but particularly this month.
Yeah, we're getting close to the end of the year. How has this year for you felt in general to last year in terms of the speed of it compared to last year?
It felt a whole lot busier.
Yeah.
Because there was a while there in the summer months in particular, it felt like it just dragged and like...
Yeah.
And
it was weird, I know, for me.
Nothing at all happened. It was just
about last summer?
Yeah.
For me, it was weird because, when COVID really hit in mid-March of 2020...
Yeah.
That bled into the spring of trying to wrap up that last semester, all being taught online, and it was like, and then that went into the summer, and there wasn't like, it was a very strange time.
Well, and I did take 4 online classes for college, so I was busy during that time, but I don't know, it just feels
it's
like
all a blur,
really until this last March, that whole year just felt, coincidentally, it just happened to be March because I got a little busier then. It just felt like nothing happened at all.
Yeah,
so,
time was a flat circle in some ways, which is very fitting for our movie today, Carnival of Souls from 1962, directed by Herk Harvey.
Not to be confused with P.J. Harvey or Pumpkinhead Harvey.
Right.
Or Harvey.
But
or Big Bad Harv.
Big Bad Harv, yeah. So this is our last film of Spooktober Spooktacular, first annual Spooktober Spooktacular. If we're around next year, which ideally we are, we'll probably be doing it again. But
yeah,
this was like another mini little series for us coming after the Planet of the Apes films, a little bit after. So
part of me would say, "Oh, I'm glad we'll be getting out of this," but then the movie we're doing next week, I'm like, "Oh God!" But,
well, in some ways, it's an epilogue. In some ways, to these movies.
We'll talk about that later.
We'll save that for the very end. But before we do that, we're going to dive right into our Blue Plate special.
Hi, Audrey.
Mama, have a cup of coffee, please?
Sure. I'll have what she's having.
Hey, who wants a large pepperoni? Coming up!
So we got really 2 items to talk about today, not as much as we usually do, I don't think. First and foremost, we wanted to touch a little bit on the situation that has recently transpired on the set of Rust, the new Alec Baldwin Western you probably heard about, where on October 21st was when this occurred. Cinematographer Helena Hutchins was inadvertently killed by Alec Baldwin actually on set, and also the director of the film as well, Joel Souza, was injured himself, and I believe is still in the hospital or dealing with the after effects of that. So this is a Western that Netflix, I believe, was funding that was going to be coming out soonish. And Baldwin, it's not one of those situations where it was someone else who was holding the gun doing this and got, everything that's happened as a result of this. But Alec Baldwin himself actually had pulled the trigger on what he was told, and he has made clear in the recent, several days, he was told it was a cold weapon, meaning that it's safe to use, that there's no bullets in the chamber or whatnot, and unbeknownst to him, there was one in there. There's a lot to get into to this, and I know that a lot of people on Twitter in the immediate aftermath were using this as a way to grind axes against Alec Baldwin, as if that has anything to do with what this is, obviously. And I know, Levi, you actually have some friends who are actively working in the film industry. So, like, when you hear news like this, what runs through your mind?
Well, my first reaction was, pure anger, obviously, over this whole thing. But, over the past few days, the more and more I think about it, the more it touches a certain place in me that of a fear that such a thing can happen to my very dear friends. Obviously, such a thing is incredibly rare. There have been, very infamous versions of this in the past, particularly the Brandon Lee
making the crow,
that had happened. And I heard about a few other ones that I'd never heard about even before that over the past few days. But I don't know. It's just firstly, a very obviously sad situation. It's a very stupid thing for people to be blaming Alec Baldwin for this whole thing, because clearly it wasn't his responsibility to, even though he, of course, pulled the trigger, it wasn't his responsibility to know that. And I don't know what the situation of it was, of why the gun was in their vicinity. I don't know, but I would assume it might have been a situation where he was pointing it over, the sight line was near them, maybe.
Yeah.
And that was the setup of the shot. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, and part of this, of course, all comes out of the fact, and I asked them about this a little bit last night, my friends, is that they didn't give me a whole lot of details about it particularly, but they've been talking off and on about the strike that's going on right now with the, what's the name of the group that's strike? It's a union, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up. I can't remember offhand.
And they're not in the union. I asked them. They were like, no. But that they, of course, that affects the whole industry anyway, that if, people aren't working. And it's also like seen as a solidarity thing, obviously. But that
the IATSE, the International Alliance for Theatrical Stage Employees.
So, and that encompasses, what they do ultimately, and even though they're not part of it, is these, random job, not acting jobs, basically.
Below the line work,
Right. There's a lot of the work that goes into
most
movies.
of the work,
Yeah, but, and so that's been going on, and I think that there were already complaints about this set. I think that Hutchins had already made, and the camera crew had already made some complaints about various working conditions. A lot of them had, I think, walked off set that day. There was kind of some different people working. I think basically some of the people that would have been, I guess, the props people, I believe, were, for lack of a better term, I guess, scabs, from what I understand, that they came on and were working and they weren't properly trained, and and that's what's been happening with a lot of these situations, and over the past year we've had, since COVID's been going on, we've had all these jobs either fall by the wayside or people that aren't qualified coming in to do them. And
this is happening across a lot of industries, and film would be no exception. That, well, if we can get by without these people or paying these amount of people to have these jobs, then we're going to cut corners. And it seems as though, unfortunately, that perhaps happened here.
And as I've heard, and this should be obvious anyway, I would guess, is that blanks and live rounds look totally different. Supposedly, I wouldn't know the difference, but that's why they don't hire me to do that job. And hopefully, this will serve as some kind of wake up call to the studios. I don't know, but it's not really worth that, obviously. Anyway, to lose lives over such a thing, but
and again, the cinematographer who lost her life, her name was Helena Hutchins, who herself was a Ukrainian American cinematographer and journalist. So our thoughts and prayers are with her and her family. And there's also the recovery of the director as well, who was also shot. And again, it's it's strange because we're so accustomed to seeing violence in movies and not really thinking much about it, but then to realize that what goes into this, if not so carefully done, can spill over into literal violence taking place against those who make these things. So, again, as you said, if nothing else can come out of this tragedy, this loss of life, hopefully it can be that there's more oversight to be done with handling these very tricky situations.
And let me say, and you would know more about this than me, and I don't want to be too negative about this, but movie sets are very volatile workplaces anyway. And
it's not a place to cut corners.
No, and it isn't. And people have the attitude of, well, I know what I'm doing, and they clearly don't. So, if anything, hopefully this can, like what my friends had said about the same thing of, the strike stuff, of build a solidarity and more of a unification of actually caring about the people you work with, so. And
that I think that's another thing too about the film industry, more so than other industries, is how transitory it is. I mean, people are coming in and out, and sometimes certain protocols are not followed as a result of that, just due to a lack of continuity sometimes, and so.
I know from what my friends tell me that it is, they work production to production, and so not that they're clearly not qualified, but that people come on and off of stuff, and it really is kind of a journeyman job.
Industry,
it's kind of a job to job basis. Now, of course, you're going to have your resumes, and people are going to vet you and everything, but just in the I feel like things like this, this kind of things like this obviously don't happen, ever, thankfully, but that this kind of, I guess, degrading of a protocol probably was already happening before COVID, but it's only increased it. So, I guess the only thing you can say about that is let's get back to taking things seriously, I guess. I don't know,
Indeed. So again, as we said, our thoughts and prayers are with the families of the Hutchins, and also that that there's, if nothing else, that this can lead to more transparency and more protocols to be more further enforced on these film sets. Our next thing we want to talk a little bit about on Blue Plate Special is Dune, which was just released. A lot of hype, a lot of fanfare around this movie. Of course, directed by Denis Villeneuve. Had a simultaneous launch on HBO Max as well as the theater. Levi's currently in the process of reading Dune.
Almost done.
Almost
got about
done.
200 pages left. As if that, but it's like an 800-page book. So.
Sure.
My version of it, anyway.
And again, this movie had so much import surrounding it. Of course, very famously, David Lynch did a version of this some years ago, and that was 84 when that came out, 83, 84. I can't remember.
Part of me wants to say 82.
Okay, maybe it was that. I couldn't remember how many years it was before Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
84 is when it was. Yeah. It was was in December of '84. Christmas release.
Okay.
The Christmas release. Imagine seeing that with your family at Christmas time.
Be interesting.
And of course, Frank Herbert's novel came out in the mid '60s, and that's been a huge deal over the last 50+ years.
The highest-selling science fiction novel of all time. So.
Oh wow, is it really? I didn't know it had that distinction exactly. So a lot of hype, and also a lot of the conversations around whether or not this movie, if it reaches a certain success threshold, if it's going to be able to get a sequel, because it's billed at the very beginning as part one.
And I was confused for a long time because I assumed it was going to be the whole story, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then you told me like a month ago. I didn't know this. It was it's only going to be part one. I was like, what? I was like, and they're like, and they might not make a second one, depending. And I was just like, threw my hands up, like, are you kidding me? But I mean, right now at the state of things, it's looking like it's going to happen.
Yeah,
probably.
I think Warner Brothers. It seems as though they're just waiting for the right time to announce it,
right.
Greenlight it.
But what's funny is it was a relatively packed theater yesterday. The guy that was sitting beside of me and directly beside of me, because our row was pretty packed.
Yeah, we saw it on the Dolby screen.
When it said Dune Part 1, he was like, Part 1?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So I'm sure there's a bunch of people that went into that were like, what, this ain't the whole thing?
Right.
You know. So there was some confusion
there is like
over
a
that.
whole series of Dune novels anyways,
Right.
so there's even if it was one film, the possibility of sequels depending on how well
and that's
it
what
did.
other people are saying is they want more already, and I'm like, I've only read 3/4 of the book, and I'm like, I think that's enough.
So I'm going to cede a lot of this conversation frankly over to you, because you have a lot more knowledge and expertise on the whole Dune world, much more so than I do. It's a lot of questions to answer here. Going into the movie, maybe what were your expectations, and how did the movie meet those expectations in whatever ways that it did?
I liked the book. I mean, and it's funny because I was basically I guess we were sitting in the car before we were gonna go into the theater, and I went through this long spiel about this is what's going on. Like, you'd already known a lot of this and had seen the Lynch movie, so it was.
And frankly, I've seen the Lynch movie, but I don't remember a lot of things.
I'll just go ahead and put it out. I think that movie's terrible. And we saw that.
We're huge fans of David Lynch, by the way,
and love a lot of the actors in it.
Yeah,
and it's a pretty good looking movie. I mean, but it's just terrible.
It has its own fandom around it.
But I want to see it again after I finish this, reading all the book, because I felt kind of bad I didn't read all the book before then, but I don't know, I'm a middle school teacher, I have things I need to do, and didn't get around to it. So if you're like, I can't believe you didn't read the whole thing, well, step into my life for a little while and see what it's like to actually have a job in.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I've liked the book, I should say. I'm not like crazy about it. But so it's funny because
how did you think? Let me say this.
Yeah.
How do you think Herbert as a novelist for science fiction compares to, say, Tolkien for fantasy with like Lord of the Rings?
Well, one thing I'll say about it is I like the more immediacy of the prose. Sometimes, and I haven't read a lot of Tolkien, but I've read The Hobbit. I've read some of Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the actual writing, I think that Tolkien is a better writer, maybe, but he likes to, at least in my memory. So if there's fans of both these people out there who know way more about them than me, feel free to send us an email, HuffmanBrothersProductions@gmail.com, and just say you're a blanking idiot, whatever. I don't care, because I have other things in my life to move on to, so whatever. I think Tolkien's writing is a little more like very more fairy tale like, and very big and grandiose, and like very old classical. That's the word I'm looking for. Whereas Herbert's work and words are a little bit more immediate in what they are. It's very kind of archly, like yes sire, and it's a lot more like,
with regards to religion or philosophy. Do you find it to be more irreverent than, say, Tolkien's work, or not?
Well, it's interesting because I have some things I'm going to say about the movie. Yes, I don't remember exactly, and I'm going to look it up now, what Frank Herbert's actual religious ideas are, but it's far more influenced by Islam.
As far as the religions
than
of
any
the
other,
universe,
than any other religion. It should be remembered also that this is in our universe.
It's like 10,000 something.
Yeah, it's like about 8,000 years later, or more or less.
In the future, yeah.
Hang on, I'm looking here about this. I'm not finding it right now. I'm not sure what Herbert's actual religion was. I should have looked this up beforehand. Yeah. But that basically the religion, to briefly describe what the religion is in that story, it's basically kind of more or less a combination of Catholicism, Islam, and Zen Buddhism of various forms.
It says here that he converted from Catholicism to Zen Buddhism in his lifetime.
Yeah. Okay. But a lot of the vocabulary and naming and names of Dune comes from Islam. And part of the point of that, I think, is because it's a very anti-imperialist book, is that at the time that was written, the Middle East was being, still, and to this day still is, at that time especially heavily, mined by the British for oil. And I think that's probably a major reason for why he picked the setting. What the whole kind of point of it is to reflect that. But so therefore, yeah, it is more reverent in a certain way. But it still is very much in touch with, this is, as Paul Atreides is the Muad'Dib, is the Lisan al-Gaib, is the Kwisatz Haderach, got through all those, is all these various things to various people, and that he truly is a chosen one and is like a religious figure in a way. Whether or not, and I haven't finished the whole book, so
yeah,
we'll see. But also the question of whether or not the Bene Gesserit's purposeful breeding of human beings across centuries to get to that point, if that was more of why, or if it is more of a divine intervention, I don't know. But so therefore, I think that yes, Tolkien's work is more immediately religious in nature because he was definitively a Christian, right? Not that this can't make,
right, sure.
But I should say that in the sense of Buddhism, that Herbert's, ideas and themes of bringing balance, like him is bringing balance to the universe, is very much part of that kind of Buddhist idea. But so, therefore, what's interesting, though, about the first half of Dune, for the most part, is that it's all in interiors. It's all, like, the first time that they're outside of a room in the book is like 125, 150 pages in.
Yeah, and it's not exactly that divide in this as far as
no, and so that was something that I thought was such. And then for the most part, since then, especially after the fall of Arrakeen, it's very much in the desert, and outdoors a lot more. But I thought that was very interesting for a story that is so very much very big in its setting, is that it chose to be that way. And also, but that makes sense in the sense of that kind of interior castle intrigue thing, that it's going for too. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember what your original question was.
So we've established you like the book.
Yeah.
How does the movie reflect the book and on its own terms as well? How did it meet your expectations?
Well, I didn't. I'll be honest. My expectations were varied going into this movie. First of all, I was not taken with Blade Runner 2049, and that was not as much just because of the movie itself as it was a realization of the soullessness of Blade Runner as a concept, which I still like.
Mm-hmm. Another obviously titan of science fiction, Philip K. Dick, that comes from in a roundabout way. Although I feel like even Blade Runner itself was not as reverent to Philip K. Dick as
it was. Dune has been far bigger than Do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep ever was. So but so I went in kind of a little bit wary. Also, the fact that my son Timothy Chalamet was going. This is going to be his big franchise thing. All the other actors that were in it. Loving Villeneuve in my own way, but also kind of wary off that last movie. I went in kind of worried about, what will this movie be? Also realizing it's going to be only part one, and reading the book and liking it, but kind of wondering. And I will say unequivocally, this is my favorite movie I've seen in a while, in general, let alone in a theater. Probably the best movie I've seen since Little Women.
Also, Chalamet.
Right. So,
he's a good luck charm.
I mean, I know he's like my favorite actor now, as far as right now, modern actor. But so I get that. But so maybe that's part of it.
This would be a good chance to address this because I don't think this is often talked enough about. What do you think makes Chalamet special as a new leading man on the Hollywood landscape? Kind of. Well, what does he offer for you?
Well, first of all, I guess physically, which is a weird place to start, he doesn't really look like anybody else. Mm-hmm. He's a very distinctive actor in that sense. Also, I guess
he doesn't look like. Well, there's a tendency, and there's a chance as he gets older, he may fall into this too. Of like, when you become a movie star, you got to look like, Chris Hemsworth or Chris Pratt, all the Chris's, Chris Pine, he's just saying nothing against him. Chris Evans, and you just gotta bulk up and look really big. He's not that.
No,
he's a skinnier guy.
One moment in this movie that made me think of is that part where Duncan Idaho played by, and yes, there's a character in the movie called Duncan Idaho.
Well, that's another thing. We're talking about the Jenny Gesserit and all these absurd. Never heard of these names. Then you get names like Paul. And then like Duncan Idaho, it's like Star Wars does the same thing.
And Lady Jessica and
it's just very crazy names. And then
this makes a little more sense of having those names in the sense that it is in the universe that we live in. That over the centuries,
Aragorn, Gimli, Sam.
Even that's like Samwise, which is like what the hell is that anyway? But but there's a moment in this where Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa, is oh, you got some muscle, and he's like, really? He's like, no. And just walks away. But I think that's what
is that after he says no? That was before.
No,
they fight like demons.
Let's put that in here now.
Let's fight like demons.
Quoting that constantly.
Love that moment. Then this is gonna go down a rabbit hole. So the song, what's it called? Is it called Jack and Diane? What's the name of the song?
Yeah,
by John Cougar Mellencamp. Whatever the song is, not very good. So whatever. Little ditty. About Jack and Diane. Anyway, also just know that go somewhere and what we're really getting in rabbit holes here. Go watch Matthew McConaughey talk about. I just think John Cougar Mellencamp is just awesome.
Are you that surprised though of him saying that?
We played football and Texas took our shirts off. Anyway, but where was I? Okay, so in that song. There's a moment where, or is it that song?
No, it is that song.
Okay, where he
sucking on chili dogs,
sucking on chili dogs, or whatever, and which we think's hilarious because it's like what? So then we were saying, sucking on chili dogs like demons, or
sucking on chili dogs like demons.
So anyway, that's what we were up to this weekend. Is just sitting around laughing about that.
Yeah.
But
unlike a crossovers, that's our specialty.
But anyway, so. What I think works about him.
So you're saying he needs to suck on some chili dogs to get a little bigger?
I guess. I don't know. Yeah. But what I think worked about him in this movie, particularly of his physicality, is that the movie in itself proved by the end he didn't need to be that to be who he is, and that's as the character itself.
I think too with for me with Chalamet is that there's this air of mystery about him. He part of it's his look, but a lot of the roles that I've most remembered him from just the last several years have had this veneer or mystique about themselves. Think about his character a little bit in obviously remember my or not
Call Me by Your
Call
Name.
Me by Your Name.
It's all right. That's okay. We'll move on.
Call Me by Your Name, which is I think really is what made him more of a bigger.
Well, that's
deal
why I was
years.
originally a fan of him, and he continues to make me proud. So
even in I think Little Women, to me, is the best film he's been in so far. His character in that is also a guy kind of stuck between multiple worlds, and is someone who knows who he's expected to be, but also kind of wants to be this other thing as well. And he specializes in roles like that. I feel like Paul is in his own way a version of that, and this new in the Dune story. So you thought he made a good Paul?
Oh yeah, cool. Well, and I asked you because I was like, what did you think of him in the movie? Because I'm gonna love him anything he's in. It doesn't really matter. But that's what I'm ultimately gonna say. I think the movie is better than the book. So, I mean,
email us,
yell at me, whatever. But
I've seen some takes online from people that I know are big Dune fans, and they haven't universally liked it, but I would put it at a high percentage of those who have did. And so I think that speaks well of the movie that for the most part it has left fans of the book happy.
Yeah. But what I think is better about the movie immediately is because and this is what I was worried about most about the entire thing, was that with a movie like 2049, which I felt didn't have as much humanity as I would have liked.
My son,
yes,
Ryan Gosling.
Yes, and I love Ryan Gosling.
So Villeneuve, he's the dad who comes in on the weekends and watches our children for us.
But I like I like the Blade Runner thing, all right, and even Villeneuve's movies in general have a certain remove about themselves.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm, what's that called in that? There's another drug other than the melange in the Dune books. Starts with a S. I want to say Sumatra, but that ain't what it is. Anyway, that like maybe I'm like snorting the melange or something here, and just I don't know. But I thought that this movie was far more human, both in the book itself and Villeneuve's other works, other than maybe Arrival, which is pretty close, especially the ending of that movie.
Yeah.
But that I felt that because the character of Paul in the book is like a lot of these other heroes, where they're very bland, just kind of like he starts as a little boy, but then becomes very like I see all and I see everything.
Yeah.
But what I really liked about Chalamet's performance is that it never went to that level.
Yeah.
He seemed at least perpetually frightened by his new and Paul was in the book early on, but at a point he still very much is like, oh, okay, well, I'll just get over it, whatever. And, But over time, and this happened in the movie too, he continually realizes, well, I don't know everything, and has to keep leaning on his mother and Shawnee eventually. And that ultimately, a lot of people say this, but the book is a lot about the women in his life, and they're the ones who actually have
contributed
gotten him to where he is. Right. And that's what a reason a lot of people love the story is that, what I find and what I appreciate about it is very anti-imperialist, which is most science fiction stories are at a certain point, and that it's very feminist. And I feel like this movie could have been just a tad more feminist, have had more of the feminine side of it, but supposedly that will be more of the second movie.
Okay.
I don't really know, but if they do another one, which they probably will.
Yeah.
Because Zendaya obviously was great, but she wasn't in it a whole lot.
And presumably she's going to be in a bigger role in the second one.
And that
Rebecca Ferguson is
really good too.
Lady Jessica and Rebecca Ferguson. She was in. I mean, she was a fairly crucial part of this movie. I feel like.
And then what's interesting too is that you usually see, excuse me, in these stories, in science fiction stories, you usually see, and this is a credit to the original book, you usually see a father and a son, or siblings, or a romantic kind of coupling. But most of that story is a mother and son going over, making the journey, and them helping each other, and kind of being aggravated at each other at different points. And it's a very interesting, different kind of alternate version of a lot of the same versions of these things. But so in that way, I felt that not only Chalamet elevated the humanity of it, but the whole thing was as well. But in particular, it should be said, I'm not going to say that the book wasn't human in its own way, because in general, the Atreides, you saw it in the movie, but especially in the book too, that when Leto Atreides, played by Oscar Isaac in the movie, they're going to see that spice harvester that is going to get hit by the worm. Now in the book, it's different, that the carry-all doesn't come, like somebody paid them off to not show up so it would get destroyed. In this, it was just that the carry-all didn't work. but that he decides, no, we're going to go in and save the people and not care about the spice. You know, who cares about that? And that part of the whole point of the Atreides coming to Arrakis is that the people there realize, oh, wait, these people are a little bit different than the Harkonnens and these other people who've ruled us for so long. So there is an inherent caring and compassion about the Atreides that is different than the Harkonnens. And I feel like that, and that was already in the book, so I felt like that was there, but especially in the movie, I think visually, to see it, the total contrast between the brightness, both in, even though their attitudes are very like, we need to be honorable and do this, but the brightness of the attitudes and just the visual look of the Atreides versus the total, almost total inhumanity of the Harkonnens, I felt like really worked of the movie. And I think that's a thing that works with movies like this when you get a book like that to adapt it, is you just get to see it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, and I know it's like, okay, I can imagine it. But I mean, literally, we laughed about them talking about walking without rhythm and how kind of goofy that was. I had no clue what that would look like, because I'm like, well, I can't imagine what that would look like. That's just such a weird idea. But to see that on the screen, it's like, oh, okay, that makes more sense to me,
Right.
But so in that way, I guess if it's ever a question, usually I'll probably take a movie over. Now it depends. But if it's something like this where I'm not as invested, I'll probably just take a movie over a book, because it's like, well, I can see it and it makes more sense to me. I know that sounds really like lazy or something, but when you're making these worlds that are so big and imaginative, it's very hard always to latch on to imagery like that.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I know we're going all over the place here, but yeah.
So again, this movie has so many expectations fit with it, and even as someone who hasn't even read the book, I've only seen the Lynch film, but I know that for a lot of sci-fi fans, the stature that Herbert's series holds in the sci-fi literary canon is pretty big. And also, even as someone who's been raised on a lot of things that have in turn been influenced by Dune, like, say, Star Wars, it's always fascinating when you finally see a full-fledged adaptation of something that has been influential elsewhere, and for it to actually live up to what I presume the source material to be. I myself was quite taken with the movie. There's a few Villeneuve films I would hold in slightly higher regard than this, Sicario being the biggest one. And then I think just barely Arrival, and then Blade Runner 2049 over this, but this is pretty close for what it is, and I don't even have some big spiritual connection to Blade Runner like a lot of other people, but I just know what that is and have more of a connection to that, and so that currency's traded in on Blade Runner 2049, obviously. I think the movie's really well done. The movie has a budget of $165 million, which objectively is an obscene amount of money to be spent on a movie. But then you look at that. But then you look at what it looks like, and it far outweighs many of the other films.
I was going to say, it looks better than any Star Wars movie I've ever seen.
Well, also even the movies the trailers for the movies we see beforehand, like, say, The Eternals. Now that's being directed by Chloe Zhao, and that does have some interesting imagery here and there, but it looks like a Marvel movie. It looks like something that
fall collection, IKEA.
It does have some stylistic forces that are a little bit different than most Marvel movies, but it still does look like, okay, it's produced by Disney, it's produced by Marvel. This seems like it's produced by another planet itself, or like some huge studio, and so to see this on the Dolby screen was a delight. It's also again been released on HBO Max. I would imagine as good as it looks on the big screen, and that's the way it's intended to be. I'm sure it would still look amazing on 4K TV.
We're gonna try to rewatch it anyway, so before it goes off.
What did you think about some of the other ensemble as well?
I thought they were good. With a story like that, there's so many characters, and it's tough to, there were whole things cut out, like the Peter DeVries character, who was the Mentat for the Harkonnens. And I always love to see that guy pop up in anything that played him. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the Rachel Dawes guy. He was also in Prisoners. Mm-hmm. It's like 2D names, and the last one's kind of strange. But anyway, that his whole character in the book was like, had a whole deal that he was going to get Lady Jessica as his concubine or whatever. That's what they call it in their what was his name? Yeah, how do you even say that? David Dasmalchian?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, he's really good and everything, but also in Twin Peaks: The Return, should be said.
Yeah.
There's just all these things that kind of, but I felt like also that the movie cut out things that didn't need to be there. So far, the whole character of Fade Rotha isn't even in the movie at all, which I think's fine. If they're going to cut that, it's like, that would just be easier to not have if that's going to be the case. Which is played by Sting in the original movie, should be said.
Should be said, this guy, too, they were talking about, he plays Polka Dot Man in the Suicide Squad. That got a lot of...
Yeah, because I know somebody had tweeted at him something like, "Man, you're in all the nerd movies," and he's like, "Yeah, it's a dream come true," or whatever. So glad for him. But I think that, and I'll love to see more of Javier Bardem as Stilgar. Obviously, I thought Momoa was all right for what he was in it. We're not big Momoa fans, but
he fit what the part of the movie anyways demanded, I think. So, and then Josh Brolin, he's in everything. He's good,
and he's supposed to still be alive, so we might see more of him later. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then obviously Oscar Isaac's always great in anything.
It's also good to see him in a good big blockbuster movie because it's been a while since he's been in one of them. Now he was in The Card Counter, which is probably my favorite movie I've seen this year, but that's a whole other kind of thing. What do we think of Skarsgård as the Baron?
That's about exactly what it needs to be.
Yeah. Pretty disgusting, vile character.
What's interesting about that character is he's so fat and big. He literally has what are called suspensors, which literally hold him up. Like, he doesn't have to walk anymore because he's so lazy. He, glides around. Which in the Lynch movie was like he literally flew around. It was, really weird looking. In this, I feel like it fits more of what the actual... But now I imagine him to not be flying that high off the ground. I imagine it almost like one of those baby, those baby things that you sit him in it and it has the wheels on it, and it can. I imagine it kind of looking like that because he looks like a big baby anyway. But yeah, I thought he was really great with that and really imposing without having to add a lot of other awful things that were in the book that he did that just don't really need to be in the movie, that he still inhabited that. I feel like very just visually, and I really love the biggest thing I love about the movie in general is just the design of everything. I think is so inspired, and I think it fits the book, but obviously you can imagine things different ways, but I imagine everything to look just a little more medieval. Yeah, because it's very much like a feudal society, and I imagine when they say Castle Caladan, I imagine it to literally look like a castle, So there are certain things about it that are a little different.
What's weird is that it's not. This world has not been something that's been depicted ad nauseum via live action work before. Anyways, really the only other thing is the Lynch film from nearly 40 years ago, almost now. So. This being its first official kind of quote live action outing outside of that, I guess it had to fit those expectations of taking those things and realizing them in a live action context.
As far as the look of the movie, it looked really amazing. It was shot by Greg Fraser, who's also going to be doing the new Batman movie. And he should win all the awards. Because one other thing I was worried about this movie is that a lot of Villeneuve's movies that, while looking very good, look kind of washed out and kind of not as colorful, look very kind of monochromatic. I felt this really was very colorful compared to what I was thinking, because that's one thing definitively about the Lynch movies. It is very colorful and exuberant, and it feels very alive. And I was kind of worried about that with this, but I felt like it looked really bright and colorful, and I loved parts of it that reminded me almost of Paul Thomas Anderson, the way some of the blue looks and some of the lens, whatever you call it, kind of lens flaring, or even some of the stuff that was in like Punch Drunk Love. It kind of looked like in certain ways, or Waves recently. But so I was very impressed by that, and that was a surprise because I was kind of worried.
Right.
And I felt like there were obviously parts of Villeneuve's, other Villeneuve movies, a lot of stuff from Sicario, like of the shots of the dunes and like them flying into Mexico in that movie. It looked very similar. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie in general, visually and just what the scene was that scene where they usually stay inside during the day in the castle because it's so hot. But he like goes out to where they're watering the palm trees, and which they said, I think they said it could like one palm tree could give water to a man, 5 men a day, and there's like however many of them. And just visually, I really like the in general, the whole movie feels like very big and a lot of space, but particularly that like courtyard scene reminded me of other like scenes in Sicario and certain other movies of his use of space. I really like. So, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly well shot, incredibly well made. Speaking as someone who is again not has not read the books, and as far as like there's probably somebody wondering like, if I've not read this, will it make sense if I watch it? You know what I mean? Is its own thing. And now, while you did explain some details to me before I went in of some things, I still think it's fairly straightforward enough to understand in terms of like, okay, you got these planetary kingdoms are kind of feuding, but they're in a loose alliance. There's this one outcast planet that basically represents indigenous peoples that they're going there to take resources from. Paul's mother is a part of this other secret order that's like much more religious in nature.
And that they kind of secretly control everything that happens.
Yeah,
with the
and
Space
so
Guild, but yeah.
I think there's enough. I think it's pretty easy enough to follow for someone who has not read the books to understand and grapple with. So I don't. If you're listening to this one, is this going to make any sense to me if I watch it? I think it will if you give it a chance. Also, again, a lot of other science fiction that has been informed by Dune has weirdly primed us for understanding things like this in a quicker way.
Right.
So, again, as someone who's not as familiar with the universe, I was still quite taken with it. Had a lot of fun watching it and seeing, again, Villeneuve work at this high level that he's working with at this point of getting the budget that he has and having a movie of this sort. And again, this was obviously had been batted around for years and years and years of, is Hollywood ever really going to get to and crack Dune in the way that it deserves? Speaking as someone who's kind of a non-fan looking at it, it seems as though they did.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
As far as, I would even say I'm a moderate fan because it's just, I don't know, it's cool to be in a new universe of something, you know?
Yeah.
Because I'm not too crazy about fantasy storytelling. I mean, but this is something really big that I've done the whole Star Wars thing. I've done Harry Potter. I've done Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. Like, I've done all that stuff. So it is kind of cool to have a new that is like older than all those other things, other than Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But that it is cool to be in that, and for it to actually like it, because I watched that Lynch movie and I was just like, I just don't think this is interesting at all, and I don't get it, and you know.
Yeah.
But it is really cool. So the last two things I would say about it, I guess before we move on, you didn't have anything more to say. Okay. Is that just how much I really loved it, and I hope people go out to see it, and if not, at least just watch it on HBO Max. You know, give it the viewership. That'll count in some way too. I'm sure. But also just how randomly, it sounds like a random thing to say, but kind of a religious experience of a movie it was to see visually. I felt like it actually really. It's funny because you said that about it's more reverent and irreligious, I guess, than a little bit more than Lord of the Rings, and Tolkien's writing. But that I felt like this is funny. This go off on a quick tangent. Back when my dear friend Ryan was in college, and I actually kind of took part in this production very briefly, there was basically a documentary that he made for a class about different places of worship and different religions for people. And I stood in as like the Southern Baptist person. I was like, well, this is kind of what God and religion means to me and why I go to church and blah, 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 you know, whatever. And so everything about that went fine. You know, our friend Carla also was in that, and kind of other people that we knew that were irreligious too, because they're kind of talking about that. But that, anyways, so he went out and shot some B-roll footage of some different churches around town. Well, when they showed the movie, I hope he won't mind me telling the story, by the way, but I'm sure he won't, because I'm not saying the people's name. I don't even know who it was. But one of the people in there was like, I'm kind of like offended by the way you shot the churches or whatever. And he was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it was kind of too shaky. Like, you didn't really... They're basically saying like he didn't really respect it or whatever.
Okay.
And he's a Catholic, so he's a religious person. I mean, he goes to... Mass every week. I mean, you know, he and I'll say, as a person, this is something I reflect on personally. I didn't go to church while I was in college. I would go to some Bible study stuff, but I wish I would have done that more often. So he did. He always did. But and I was just laughing about that. I was like, what? I mean, he thought it was ridiculous, you know. And I think most people did. But so anyway, so things can clearly, in that girl's opinion, and certainly in my opinion too, even though I disagree with that statement, be shot in a religious manner, I guess.
Yeah.
So therefore, as a random tangent, but to explain that in this way, I think this movie adequately and visually expressed a sort of spirituality
to Herbert's
of that, and just to me personally, of just, I guess the way it looked was just a kind of spiritual experience for me. So it's strange to say, but in that way, I felt spiritually fed by the movie. It's not at all about Jesus or God or whatever, but in its own way, I guess it is a chosen one Messiah narrative. But even still, I felt like there was a definitive live wire electric current of spirituality going through the movie that isn't even always as present in the book, or at least felt. So in that way, I also loved it. So that was probably like 30% or 40% of why I actually love the movie. But anyway.
Well, there you go. So again, if you get the chance to check out Dune either in theaters or on HBO Max, we encourage you to do so, because we were both quite taken with it. And again, it's finally interesting just to see this movie come out, because it was just like, was it supposed to come out last year?
I think so. I think they had aimed for, I don't remember exactly, but I think they had aimed for Christmas, and then they kind of pushed it back. So thankfully, it finally came out. And it seems like it's making its money.
Yeah.
And it seemed pretty packed in there for people. I was kind of surprised. I was like, people want to come out to see Dune, you know? Like, it's just because that's something that's a big deal for a lot of people, but it isn't like Star Wars, where it's lived in the mind of the average moviegoer for so long. I'm surprised that as many people came out as they did. And they probably were just curious more than anything. They were like, what is this thing? You know?
Yeah, sure.
So I didn't really get a read on what the theater thought of it exactly, but I mean, I guess people seem to be into it. I don't know. But quickly, do you want to talk about that Uncharted trailer?
Well, so they showed some trailers before the movie. Ambulance, the new Michael Bay movie. When that's one of the more appealing trailers that they show, then A, good for Michael Bay. B, there's something wrong with some of the other ones. But that actually looks like it could be a fun little time. But yeah, Uncharted. They're making an Uncharted movie. This has been kicked around for a long time. At the very beginning, it even said like PlayStation Productions, I think it said too. And to see that logo, see the PlayStation logo on a cinema screen was low key offensive to me. It was just like, oh really? I don't know. Something about that. I was like, all right, well, whatever. So Uncharted, I've never played any of those games, even though I've had PlayStation 4.
Some friends of mine have, and they really like it.
But they're kind of these big adventure games, almost like a new
like
version
Raider,
of Indiana Jones or Tomb Raider or whatever. Starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. Thoughts on the trailer for that?
First of all, I went into the movie yesterday pissed off already.
Because of Tom Holland?
Because of Tom Holland, who I like fine enough. I don't have anything against him. But, you know, I always hear our mom say a sort of thing like, but if you mess with my family or say something bad about my family, then I'm going to get mad. I'm going to wreck it, basically, you know. And I'm that way about Timothée Chalamet, so, because he's my son. Yeah. So we know that. Yeah. So some people yesterday had retweeted that video of Tom Holland dancing as like the Singing in the Rain, and then that Umbrella song by Rihanna, and the
From lip sync battle.
Zendaya was there, and
Yeah.
like it was saying basically Timothée Chalamet wishes he could do this or whatever,
Yeah.
and you know.
It's not middle school.
I
or
mean,
high school
and I
stuff,
feel like I'm in that mentality about this, like I'm getting so mad about
Yeah.
it, but I'm just like, yeah, I guess Timothée Chalamet wishes he were not as great of an actor and was a nice enough guy, but was in movies that don't mean anything. I guess that's what he would, and doing lip sync back, like, and this isn't anything against Tom Holland in particular, like, you know, I'm saying this like, all due respect, but like if I caught my son doing that, like he'd be grounded for a while. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't disown him, but I would be like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
But so I was already aggravated about that. Not even at Tom Holland so much as just that whole situation of like people like, and I get it. You know, I know that there is a contingency of people who are like, I'm not really into the whole Chalamet thing, and it's like, fine, whatever, just don't.
Should be said that happens with any new movie star.
It's like, don't talk about my family, you know. And that's fine, you know, whatever. But that had already pissed me off. So then to see him on the big screen before that movie, I was kind of like, oh, okay, and that was reminding me of that. So that happens. He's on. It's like going through the trailer.
Yeah.
He's on screen. I'm like, okay. PlayStation Films logo. I want to laugh. Mark Wahlberg's on screen. I'm like, and then Ramble On by Led Zeppelin starts playing. Now, I'm not as big of a Led Zeppelin fan as I used to be, but and I was just like,
but it ain't just the song. Right. They take it and like mess with it.
And it's like,
too,
but
though.
it just really is amazing how there's those certain things in your life you see. And I'm like, I hate everything about this already. And then Antonio Banderas showed up, and I was like, okay, well, he's making some money, so I like that about it.
Yeah.
But like, it's just really is amazing how you can totally loathe a thing, you know, just immediately. Like I had remembered that they were making that movie, but then it's like you totally out of nowhere. I didn't even know what the movie was. The whole trailer, I had no clue. I was like, I don't even know what movie this is, and I hate it already.
I think I knew what it was just because I'd heard a trailer for it dropped, and I knew who was in it, and I was like, oh, it's that.
Yeah, so I had no clue what it actually was, but I was just like, I hate everything about this. Like, it's amazing. So yeah, won't be seeing that.
Yeah, it is interesting that we're like finally starting to get more and more video game adaptations. And for the longest time, people I know held up that series. Oh, it's like cinematic. It's like can be just as good as the movies or whatever. And
always people and our dear friends and sort of podcast compatriots over at the OST podcast, so go listen to them. Our cousin Philip and
friend Kelly,
that
which I want to say, big fans of them by the way.
Oh,
they're doing well.
But that they were talking about this sort of thing. They did a Mortal Kombat episode, and they were talking about movies and video games, and they had a really interesting conversation about that. But that Philip, I believe, said something like, but everybody always says it can be as good as. They're always saying add movies. It shows that movies are clearly superior. And that video games can't be cinematic, ultimately, because they aren't cinema. They are a thing that is made
cinema
to be
itself
interactive.
was described that way in comparison to literature many years ago. And that if, like, the book's better than the novel, or the novel, or whatever, that conversation still goes on. But I mean, in the 30s and 40s, when film was starting to slowly be taken a little more seriously, the whole question was like, of certain dramas, it's like, it's like literary, or it was this or that as a way to say, well, literature's inherently still better than the movies.
Yeah.
And now we're getting to a point where that's now being bandied about video games to cinema, which to me, likely in the same way that film overtook literature as the going popular entertainment, that video games are already doing that for movies as well. You know,
and then someday somebody will be saying they can be like video games, whatever that hellish.
I'm trying to even think what that will be
I
that people
know.
say that about.
I don't know.
Yeah,
probably virtual reality, some version of that. I don't know.
There'll probably be cinema they'll be saying that about. Oh, it can be just as good as video games though. Like, that's probably what's going to happen eventually.
Right. It'll be the opposite. But yes.
Or TV is the same thing. Old TV can be just as good as movies in the last 25 years.
Movies are. I mean, that's clearly more like movies than video games are, obviously.
Yeah, more of a direct ancestor.
But yeah.
So you're out.
Oh, yeah.
Sing 2, though? What about that? You still in on that? We didn't see the trailer for that again, by the way. But
I would rather see that.
Yeah.
I mean,
the last shot of that is transcendent, So, any other well, we saw the
Licorice Pizza.
Licorice Pizza. And again, it was like, trailer. And at the very beginning of that, Elena Hammond, she's like walking through the courtyard and just rolling her eyes and shaking her head.
Yeah.
I feel like that was me to most of those trailers.
And you were like, all right, going into this.
Oh, well, flesh and blood human beings interacting.
Now listen, young lady.
I felt the same way I'm currently reading Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen, his new book, and it's just like, it's just so refreshing to involve yourselves in the lives of flesh and blood human beings. It's just like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
We already talked about the Batman trailer. They showed that
yeah.
on the big screen. And I was curious how many people that was their first time actually having seen that on the big screen that was in the theater. But, so overall, I think the trailers were okay enough.
Whatever. But the movie was better than all those.
Well, sure.
So Nicole Kidman says we make movies.
Oh, do we want to talk about this a little bit?
I don't really care to talk about it, but
let's do it a little bit.
Because I don't have anything.
The new thing. Well, let me just say, I'm not one of those people that's like roll my eyes and complain about all the ads that they show for movies. It is annoying, but it's just been so part of our lives for a while now. It's whatever. And then you get like the AMC is trying to sell you on the premium Alias
points that add up quickly.
Yeah, all
that is before the trailer started.
Then you get one or two premiere ads, like a good Chevy ad, so to speak. You know what I mean? And then then you get the movie trailers.
Yeah.
And then you get one last AMC bumper, and then you get this Nicole Kidman promo, which is of Nicole Kidman walking to an empty movie theater.
Yeah.
And is clearly saying, "Oh, come back to the movies." And I know you've been
movies.
Yeah, as her ex-husband once said.
Yeah. See, they're united in that.
Yeah, they're obsessed with that.
Right.
And it's very clearly the movies are back. The movies are better than ever. Come here, And so she walks into the movie theater, and then is kind of standing there for a while. And what's playing on screen is Jurassic World, Wonder Woman, La La Land, Creed, and I might be
there might be something else,
but it's just her alone watching these,
and she has a Coke beside her, but no popcorn, which I thought was weird. Yeah, but anyway,
and there's no way probably Nicole Kidman drinks Coke unleaded straight up, diesel Coke. Right. It's I like to call it because and nothing against Nicole Kidman, by the way. I love Nicole Kidman. But the whole thing's just very strange. It's just
so what, yeah.
It's weird because come back to the movies, it's we're back at the movies.
Yeah.
Right? You're showing us.
Put that on Fox or something. Fox or CBS.
Well,
or
I think
ABC,
it has been released as an individual thing.
But it's but I am here. And then what's even funnier is that all that happens. And then with the movie we saw yesterday, and I don't remember exactly what it said. It was some vague riddles in the dark thing or whatever.
Well, I want to say even before that.
Okay. Yeah.
And then if you see the Dolby, you see an extra promo.
Well, wasn't the Dolby before that though?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, so you see the Dolby thing, and then
if you because I saw The Last Duel this last Tuesday.
Yeah.
Which is actually really good, by the way. Anybody, if it's still playing by the time you hear this, go see it. That's the last thing that plays before the movie when the regular screen plays.
But so yeah. Then what's funny is that it's the whole Nicole Kidman thing. Oh yeah. And then I don't remember like I said exactly what it said, but it was some vague riddles in the dark or something. It said something like dreams are from the deep or something. It said, but it's or whatever.
It was a black
and it's
screen.
What? And it's this is Dune now.
Yeah.
And then it has this real percussive, loud. I mean, and it felt oh yeah, we're getting into it. But it's just it's hilarious coming off we make movies better, and then or whatever that was. It's just the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But
immediately grab you by the throat.
Right, and it's just wow, this movie's starting now. Okay. And it's always such a great feeling to get past all the crap.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we know, I'm not a fan of trailers. I think we ought to do away with them. Let's just. Or we ought to not care as much about it. We shouldn't do away with them, but let's just be all right, get over the trailers. I don't have to be sold on something, okay? I can just go see it. That's fine. Well, funny enough, one of the last movies I remember being really sold on, I might want to go see that, was Sicario. Randomly.
Yeah.
Because that was a movie I didn't really know about. Didn't really know about Villeneuve in particular. And was like, oh, it looks kind of interesting. I guess we'll go see that. And, obviously great. But there aren't very many movies that I see trailers for that I don't already know I want to see going in. King Richard was another trailer, by the way. I forgot.
Yeah. It's also weird because now they're so ubiquitous on the internet.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was like, what is literally playing? And it was a new thing you're totally seeing now. You can see things on the internet.
Yeah.
And it's not
but so it's just a big waste of time, all that before the movie. I want to walk in, and I want the movie to start when I'm there, and I don't care if anybody else can,
Last thing I totally want to say about this, unless you have anything to add. I was utterly shocked there was no Matrix Resurrections trailer.
Yeah.
I was thinking, this is Warner Brothers' biggest film they have until December, Dune. Why wouldn't they stick a Matrix trailer with that? Sci-fi action crowd, why wouldn't you just go ahead and prime that pump already? I was shocked that they didn't, but whatever. That also is getting a HBO Max and simultaneous theatrical release, which is not going to be the case starting in 2022. I think Warner Brothers is moving away from that as a model.
Which I'm glad to hear.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm glad about that with Dune, just so I can be like, I can have time to see it again without having to go to the theater. Because it takes time to go to the theater. I mean, not that I don't love it, but being as busy as we are,
it is an expense.
It's tough to have to go do. So that is cool to be like, okay, I get to see that again.
I keep saying one last thing. Actually, this is the last thing. The one thing I was thinking about, Villeneuve now seems like Warner Brothers' go-to director. Because Nolan's out the door.
Yeah.
No, Nolan's out the door.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, that's what I meant is that
because now he's partnering with I think Universal to do his Oppenheimer movie, which it was just announced, by the way. Who the female lead for that was? I can't remember. Emily Blunt is going to be the female lead in Oppenheimer. Is what it was. Yeah, I remember.
Which I love Nolan. I love him more than Villeneuve overall. But, I don't know, Villeneuve just made this movie, and it's like, Nolan, what are you going to do now after Tenet?
I know, I just saw just yesterday, I think it was, that he put out some quotes, Villeneuve, praising Tenet, and he thought that, he didn't even call him a friendly competitor, but I can see that, I can read between the lines and see what's going on here. And Villeneuve oh wow, I just think Chris Nolan's just making great movies right now, and Tenet blew my mind, and just all this stuff. He was really into it. But it seems
Nolan's I watch no other movies than my own or something, whatever. Well, that's not how he sounds. It sounds like that I'm gonna prank my dad video, which But anyway,
yeah. So, but it seems like he's the go-to guy now for Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And it's weird because this is not as sure a thing of a box office expectation as much as Nolan movies usually are.
Yeah.
But Tenet is a weird special case because that wasn't even released in ideal circumstances. Whatever. Speaking of not ideal circumstances, dying. Dying's not an ideal circumstance,
I guess it's already spoiling the movie, but I mean...
I guess so, kind of.
But you should have seen this by now. If you didn't, too bad.
Oh, well.
Goodbye.
Too bad, that's it. Carnival of Souls from 1962 is what we're looking at today. So this is, it's got a huge reputation now amongst the kind of horror community, I feel like, and it's like taken on a life of its own. And, over the last several decades. I think it started to become really a revived upon movie in the late 80s, I think it was, really.
The mid to late 80s.
Because some of the reviews we read were written in the late 80s, I guess when they was going through more of a retrospective kind of phenomenon at that point. So, Levi, give us the deets.
All right.
Carnival of Souls.
Carnival of Souls is a 1962 American independent horror film produced and directed by Herk Harvey and written by John Clifford from a story by Clifford and Harvey and starring Candace Hilligoss. His plot follows Mary Henry, a young woman whose life is disturbed after a car accident. She relocates to a new city where she finds herself unable to assimilate with the locals and becomes drawn to a pavilion of an abandoned carnival.
Okay.
So, as far as the cast, it's not really a lot to say because most of these folks are non-actors or amateur actors.
Yeah.
The main one is Candace Hilligoss as Mary Henry. You have anything to say about her in the movie?
She's really good. You know, I think she's. You know, let me say this.
She
first.
is a professional actor. It should be said.
A lot of the reviews we read, and we can get into this a little later, hinted at. You know, the dialogue's a little stilted. Some of the performances are kind of clunky. But her sense of terror and awe at her situation is something that her facial expressions are among the more memorable aspects to me of this movie. So I think for that she's really good, and I think the movie excels because of her in large part as well.
And I'll just run through some of these. We can just talk about some of the other characters a little bit. Frances Feast is Mrs. Thomas. She's the woman that owns the boarding house that she lives in St. Louis, Missouri. Because that's actually where the movie... Well, it's weird. I'm not sure if the movie was actually filmed there as much. I know it was definitely parts of it.
In Lawrence, Kansas, I think. Mostly,
mostly
and
Kansas,
in Salt Lake City.
I believe.
A little bit.
Anyway.
Lawrence, Kansas is a randomly big town in city in Kansas in a lot of ways because that was the site of some bloody Kansas battles in 1850s, as well as the home of University of Kansas in Lawrence. Huge basketball
It does
school.
say Harvey shot Carnival of Souls in 3 weeks on location in Lawrence and Salt Lake City. So
there you go.
Yeah. Also, the movie was written in 3 weeks. So 3 weeks. That's all this movie has.
And again, there's a lot of independent movies that are shot in such a short amount of time like that.
But as Frances Feast and Miss Thomas owns the boarding house. I mean, really adequate role. I mean, just as like, oh, the old woman that's nice, and like, oh, you're weird. You need to get gone or whatever. Sidney Berger as John Linden. I feel like he's one of the most memorable things about the movie. He's like the weirdo neighbor.
Yeah.
And we can talk more in the later on about some of the themes of the movie, but one of the big ones is that the kind of male patriarchy oppressing the female, and there's different versions of that. There's Sidney Berger as John Lennon, Art Ellison as the minister, and Stan Levitt as Dr. Samuels.
Yeah.
And even Herk Harvey as the man, the ghost in the movie, the ghoul,
I feel like
or whatever.
Candace Hilgoss and him are the things you most remember as far as actors in the movie.
Yeah.
And he don't even have any words. I don't even think he's just always like stalking her and kind of that ghostly presence.
But
he's got that like white makeup on that's very memorable. Yeah.
And interestingly, it kind of fits these different characters. The Linden, the John Linden character that Berger plays kind of represents like the kind of basic male horn dog, for lack of a better word, and kind of like, oh, I'll take care of you, and blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
And then the minister, obviously representing a more religious idea, of, oh, I'll guide you this way. And then the Stan Levitt's Dr. Samuels is being like, oh, well, saying, I'm a doctor, I'll help you with your mind. So it's like all these different kind of places to go for her character, and nobody really can help her, obviously. Other than that, there aren't a whole lot of other, just different actors, but...
What was the budget for this? Is it not?
It was $33,000.
Okay. And one of the most famous things about it was that it was really not a box office success. No. We mentioned this last week. It was a double feature with
a movie called The Devil's Messenger, which is now, I was about to say The Devil's Forgotten Messenger, which is now remembered because it
was paired with this.
So it's even less
62.
Well, that isn't loading. Who cares about it anyway? Yeah.
What time of year did this come out? I'm curious.
September 26th.
Okay,
the day before your birthday. Yeah. Of 1962.
So
you weren't born then, were you?
No.
Okay.
That was just a mere few weeks before the Cuban Missile Crisis. Was about to.
So we were happy to not be married or alive, married. Wow. Okay. Our dad was alive then.
Yeah.
He remembers some about it.
But. So Herk Harvey, the director of this, he also was, kind of the antagonist, if you want to call it that. It's almost passed into legend at this point that this was kind of his only real big movie at all, or movie period, really.
Yeah.
He came from a whole background of making some industrial and educational films.
Yeah.
But this was actually a feature film that he produced, I guess, through the company that did.
Yeah.
Always did those other things.
it wasn't so much that it was made through that company, I think, as it was made with people who worked for that company. Right. It was kind of a side project.
Okay.
But a lot of those people helped work on it. Which is interesting because, you know, the movie does kind of certain parts about it still retain this very strange kind of industrial, educational filmmaking style about, like, certain scenes with the doctor in the movie feel very much like the human mind is blah, blah, blah. You know, these very, like, let me tell you about psychology, you know, and even, like, people said this in the reviews we read, the beginning of the movie with a car crash feels kind of like one of those, if you drive this, like, you need to be safe while driving or whatever kind of, you know, it feels very much like
a
that.
Cautionary tale, like, this will happen to you if you,
Yeah, but that the movie, had started as, I believe that Herk Harvey was driving by Saltaire, which is this old dance hall and pavilion and kind of carnival on the Salt Lake in Utah, that had been owned by the Mormons at one point, but I think they had sold it and it was kind of in disrepair and nobody used it anymore. I think it's used now as a concert venue, or it had been. It may not be being used again. I don't know, but it's most famous now for being in this movie. But that anyway, he was driving on the road and saw it off in the distance and thought, oh, that'd be an interesting place to have a movie. So then he came up with basically the idea of these ghouls dancing there, and that I think that was basically the only idea that he gave John Clifford, the screenwriter, and that John Clifford wrote the screenplay and came up with everything within about 3 weeks, and basically it was kind of his idea for everything.
Yeah. Well, it feels as though it's a film that, while incredibly evocative, not a lot of story moving forward going on. Not that there has to be, and I think
it's already an hour and 18 minutes. It's not long.
It's short. Yeah. And so it's just got this very enchanting quality about it that feels almost fairy tale-ish, almost feels like an allegory or a mystery in that way, more so than a engaging story, so to speak.
Yeah.
And in that way, I think it fits in pretty interestingly in the context of horror in the 1960s. A lot of the reviews we read made mention of, it feels like a Lost Twilight Zone episode, something we came across a lot when we were reading stuff for Seconds as well. That it just speaks to really how ubiquitous and all-consuming the Twilight Zone was in the culture of the 1960s, that anything that slightly resembles that is going to have a pretty clear and obvious connection that people make to the Twilight Zone. For you as a horror fan, looking kind of at especially of this time period, the 1960s, where does this fit for you in terms of where horror was in the 1960s and what it had to maybe do for the genre moving forward?
Yeah, well, this is one of my favorite horror movies ever, so in that sense, obviously, this is the best, I think, of those types of things. But at that time, it's interesting because we had moved from the Universal monster movies of the 30s and 40s, and those had made their own transition, where at the beginning it was a lot more about, look at this freak of nature and this weird thing and all these literary adaptations. And then it moved into this kind of World War II era, like Monster Mash, basically, where all the monsters are fighting, and it's these big kind of comic book kind of exposés of this thing. And then they kind of transitioned out for a while. And then he had kind of some horror noir mystery stuff there in the late 40s, I guess.
It seemed like to me the 50s has a lot of, nuclear fear.
And it was a lot more of like the
aliens,
monster movies.
Maybe, monster movies.
Monster movies and like movies like Tarantula, and I'm going to feed you to my tarantula. And Tarantula, the Mole People, the Wasp Woman, like all these movies that are very like, oh, people are turning into these monsters because they're messing with science and stuff. And then you had this weird kind of thing in the late 50s, early 60s, where a lot of these horror movies were like, made very independently. All kinds of movies, Giant Gila Monster. I'm trying to think of something like The Screaming Skull. Just all kinds of these really crappy, low rent, and movies like these AIP movies, but not like the Corman movies. But stuff like I Was a Teenage Werewolf, I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and then,
I was a werewolf communist werewolf.
I Was a Teenage Communist, is that SCTV thing.
Right.
But no, I was a teenage werewolf, and then I was a teenage Frankenstein. Movies like that where it's like.
I love, by the way, that a werewolf is like a disease you can catch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, I became a teenage werewolf. Like, I become a teenage Frankenstein. It's like, how did that work itself out?
That's
like,
a stupid movie. So has Whit Bissell in it though, who I'm kind of a fan of.
There you go.
But anyway, I think both those movies have Whit Bissell in them actually. But a lot of movies like that, and like Bucket of Blood. There were a lot of these and that was obviously a Roger Corman thing. But so you had some of those low budget Corman movies that were happening, and then you had the Poe movies, which had a little bit more.
Vincent
cachet
Price and a lot of them,
right, and they were a little bit more. Oh, okay, these are a little more literary, and But so you had all these types of movies, but at the same time, like I said, you had stuff like Psycho.
I was going to say, it seems to me, at least from my perspective, Psycho was a game changer among many ways. That mainstream horror could become a little bit more psychological than it maybe had been in the past. And part of that's the power of Hitchcock and the Hitchcock brand at that point, which we may be talking about in just a few weeks.
Yeah,
who knows?
and that maybe. But that so that saw a transition of stuff like Psycho. I think of stuff like Bunny Lake is Missing.
Oh yeah, all those Preminger movies. Yeah.
Even something like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Some of these like movies that are a little more like they're horror movies kind of, but they're more like thrillers, and like I said, they're a lot more psychological
and they're human and they're messy,
right, and they're very ugly.
And I mean, I feel like seems to me that's an obvious improvement over a lot of the things that was coming before.
So in that sense, also there being all
and for some of those you can start to see, because usually this stuff happens through genre than it does through anything else first. Not predominantly, but you're starting to see a little bit more European art cinema influence slowly filter into some of these things through that whole realm of horror, I feel like, to American screens.
Roman Polanski making movies like The Knife in the Water and Repulsion.
Yeah.
Certain things like that.
And later on, at the very end of the decade, Rosemary's Baby was a huge,
and so movies like that are influencing stuff that way. And then the 70s was a big horror boom. So this movie kind of sits in the middle of a lot of those things. And what's interesting is that it is like some of these other, low budget independent horror movies like those. I was a teenage well, not exactly like those, but movies like Tormented and some of these other a lot of these ghost movies and Screaming Skull and stuff like that, where it feels very cheap. A lot of these, but there's something about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little bit. It's not a little bit different. It's a lot bit different. But it actually, in essence, isn't really all that different from a lot of these other movies. But I think what works about it is the atmosphere, and it is made by somebody who clearly knows how to make movies. But sadly never did again.
Right.
As far as a feature film.
And in general, I think, and every decade in film history, pretty much, the movement of independent film is exponentially larger than what came before it. And so you see an explosion by the 80s and 90s, but even at this time in the 60s, it's easier to raise money for independent productions and and certainly somebody like Herk Harvey, who already has this company and has this connections, who's making industrial films or educational films, has a clear leg up in terms of having a little bit more of an apparatus to make something like this.
Right. Also, I don't mean to interject this into this, but Ed Wood being in the 50s too, of being a big horror filmmaker and being independent. So I was just thinking of all the really bad movies I've seen, like Robot Monster is another one. But anyway,
so Herk Harvey, very famously, he made this. He didn't have, he didn't make really any other feature films again. And this movie kind of went a little bit more by the wayside in the intervening years, but I think one thing that brought people back to it, among other things, were the themes of it. One big one I think that this plays on is the whole hitchhiker myth, which a lot of Twilight Zone episodes are versions of that, or taking that and expanding upon it.
There was definitively that one that was that very much.
Where do you think? What are the themes of this movie that really speak to you and bring you back watching it? I know you mentioned earlier the whole feminist idea behind it, and also patriarchy constantly badgering or her almost harassing this woman, and she's always looking to escape to get away to someplace new, and everywhere she goes, it's not possible.
Right, and it's either following her or she's asking it for help and it doesn't really want to help her.
Yeah.
And somebody said, well, I think what really was one of the more interesting things I've heard somebody say about the movie is at the very end, when she's on that beach and they run up on her and she falls down on the ground, all the ghouls are there, and she basically dies in that version of the story before it transitions to being, she was actually dead the whole time,
Right.
But that when she's screaming in that final moment, it's that the person who wrote that, I believe it was the Criterion essay, which is very good, that they said is basically her realization that no one can save her. Yeah. And that this is it, and I feel like that's really one of the more powerful moments in the whole movie, not only visually, but really thinking about it in that way, that the whole movie she's felt totally alone and disassociated from reality, and that nobody can help her, and it's finally in that moment where she just basically, weird thing to say, obviously pun intended, but gives up the ghost in that way, and just is like, this is it,
Right.
So in that way, I think that, but also, I think something that is a little more vague is just the kind of transience and just the feeling of being lost that the 60s especially would come to represent later on in the decade. But it's interesting that I feel like...
Well, just a few years later, Seconds, we talked about that was its own version of this, too.
I feel like this is kind of really, in a weird way, the best version of that exists, and it's not even definitively like some of these other kind of buzzword movies that Corman would make, like The Trip or Psych Out, which are fine enough movies, but...
those movies are clearly... trading in the currency of these phenomenons and trying to get people, if you're a doper, come see this, or like you're on acid, come see this.
And this is a more vaguely, strangely intellectual version of such a thing that felt like everybody has the answers. It's kind of it's like in they keep talking about it. It's one of the more interesting things when you grow up, having watched Our Brother Where Art Thou, and you've seen it a million times. Keep talking about in the movie, people are looking for answers. They keep saying all the time or whatever. Yeah. And I feel like that was already becoming the case after the conclusion of World War II and kind of the first real decade of the Cold War, and the success and promise of America, but in the beginnings of the 60s already, even before the Kennedy assassination, there was this feeling of people looking for answers that they can't ever solve, and nobody really wants to help anybody either.
But also the feeling of that there are ghosts that are better left dead and buried that are still haunting us in some ways. I mean, I think even now, and certainly now, but even at the time, the Korean War was something that was not really all that widely talked about. People wanted to move on from it as quickly as possible, and there's a lot of people that her lives were ruined, destroyed, or affected by that. But that's something that everybody was willing to just put off and move on from. I think this movie came out in 1962. I feel like for the realm of the 60s, 1962 is an especially randomly poetic year of the decade because, for one thing, American Graffiti specifically takes place in 1962. 1962 is a year represents the pride before the fall, or the moment before the 60s, quote, became the 60s of the insanity of 63 onwards. And so this coming out in 62 almost acts as a, if you want to get into the whole idea of the concept of the zeitgeist or whatever, is almost harbinger of what's to come or the things to come. And when we watch it now, as far as reflecting on that, And again, as I said earlier, this was a mere few weeks really before the Cuban Missile Crisis reached its apex even as well. I mean, again, this is a very 60s era movie. And again, its connection to the Twilight Zone, I think, in a roundabout way, only further informed that.
Yeah.
Anything else about that?
Not really. I think it's time to transition with a question. So I think about this with this movie in particular a lot, as far as it being a masterpiece. Do you think that first of all, that the movie as a masterpiece status was intentional, but even specifically some of those themes of that meaning of we're lost and we don't know what to do was intentional at the beginning of the 60s or not? Or do you think it's all kind of a coincidence? that it was that
Well,
this movie
this
does
is a
work.
good opportunity just to talk about in general what a quote film masterpiece is, but
Yeah.
because I think this would fit into that. And let me also say, I mentioned this last week, and I'll reiterate this again for those who didn't hear it. I think of this movie very much in concert or one with. I think it works as it would make a good double feature with Detour.
Yeah.
You know, the film noir from the
Yeah.
40s. That, like this, has kind of become this cult classic that's reputation has gotten much larger over the years. Both have fairly small shoestring budgets. Both feature some non-professional actors.
The road movies. too.
Road movies. Yeah. And, you know, they both have, quote, continuity errors, or they both have little things that are not as polished as what Hollywood movies are typically. But they're, as I said last week, they're movies that are almost perfect to watch at like 11:30 at night on a Friday night. Nothing else is going on, and you're kind of channel surfing, and you land on one of those two movies, and the dreamlike nature of either one of them really lend themselves into being these late-night fever dreams of despair or, you know, anger, nihilism, you name it, that they either one represents. And so, you know, it's interesting. I think both of them are, quote, masterpieces. But film noir and horror, respectively, are not movies that, specifically when they were made, were held in high regard. Yeah. And I think specifically as far as what was intentional about a movie like this and how we look at it many years later, I would imagine as much as Harvey was proud of this movie and wanted it to be a success, it also for him was likely also maybe a stepping stone into doing something, quote, more reputable or more distinguished. Maybe I'm sure he was thinking, you know, if this movie's good enough, maybe I could go out to Hollywood. Maybe I could become a filmmaker outside of just making these industrial films. So, you know, I feel like part of this movie's success story over all these years is rooted in the fact that it was not a success when it came out, and it, you know, it lends itself this air of mystery or mystique to be a late blooming masterpiece as opposed to being appreciated as a masterpiece in the moment. Because as far as the reputations of films go, it's always weirdly easier to start off in a bad place and to see it be elevated to a good place, because if you start off at the, quote, you get all these great reviews, you get box office, then as the years goes on, people, all they want to do is like take a peg off of you or kind of demote you. Yeah. You know, Wizard of Oz isn't as good as people say it is. For one thing, it's as good as everybody says it is, and then some. Yeah. Okay.
I was going to say, in fact, it's better than
it's literally maybe the second best, or among the top 3 films ever made, so whatever. But it's just very easy for people to, quote, take a movie down a peg, to criticize it if it's been heralded as this great thing. And it also speaks to the movies that last and transcend over many decades. Movies that did get a lot of box office, were critical successes, and we still consider good. You think of a movie like, say, Silence of the Lambs. Yeah. It was widely applauded and considered this grand masterpiece about when it came out. And loosely speaking, all these years later is still one of the great pieces of Hollywood cinema that exists. That, again, this is almost the reverse, where it was not really all that popular, but then over the years, its reputation has grown so much so that sometimes while I do think it is a masterpiece, could be possibly overrated by some people just because it never was considered that masterpiece. Yeah. And so there's this tendency to sometimes overpraise things. Again, I wouldn't say that's as common with this movie as it is with others. But how do you think it fits into that continuum of how we perceive of what a masterpiece is in the moment or later, and what role that has to play with this movie?
I mean, I think it was at the time. I mean, the movie's a movie, you know. The movie doesn't change. It's just I guess the people
reputation,
do, or the reputation does. But I mean, just speaking as someone who honestly didn't really know exactly that the movie was as beloved as it was, and kind of saw it as, oh, that just looks like another one of those kind of low-budget independent horror movies I kind of like. And I saw it and really quite liked it the first time. Yeah. But over the years, it's like it has this strange hold on you that you want to keep coming back to it. It's a lot like in the movie itself, like the carnival or the man. It keeps kind of following you in this weird way. Yeah. But that in that sense, I think it is, it is a masterpiece. But like I said, as far as the question of intention or not, I mean, it's clearly a well-made movie, and he knew what he was doing. But about all these double meanings we read into it, was that the case, or did these people just after the fact say, yeah, I kind of intended this, or didn't say as much of that, and we attach ourselves to it? But I think what makes a movie a masterpiece sometimes is its ability to do that anyways, without necessarily being it definitively. It doesn't really matter if it was. It invites the mind.
Well, to that end, a movie like this is a sort of a Rorschach test where it's kind of evocative and, inviting enough that whatever you want it to be, it kind of allows itself to be that with any given viewing. If you want to primarily watch it as like a harbinger of death and us existing in a realm where we realize we could die at any moment, but yet we continue to live, you could look at it that way. If you want to look at it purely as from a more feminist perspective of this woman trying to make her way through a world that is not patriotic, but patriarchal, and is trying to keep her down, and she everywhere she goes, that's always there to kind of sideline her. You could view it as that. It's really evocative and enchanting enough of a movie. It kind of allows you to look at it whatever way you want to look at it, in that way. And obviously, a movie like this that is that evocative is going to certainly have a lot of influences that it puts in the world as well. For many, many years, people have mentioned, David Lynch had to have been influenced by this. I've seen a video of him online literally talking about that this was a movie that did have an impact on him and something he was inspired by. What about Lynch do you see kind of at work here that he would maybe later take and make his own versions of?
Well, there's specific things in the movie while we watch them I will kind of point out that remind me of Lynch. But I think the the dreamlike nature of it, obviously, but also a movie specifically like Lost Highway, I think is very much, and people have said this is a lot like this, and I feel like takes a lot from Carnival of Souls. But I think it's just and also just the sense of absurdity, and when I say dreamlike, I also mean dreamlike and absurd in the dialogue and the delivery. Which with Lynch is clearly intentional. I'm not like I've said, I'm not as sure of that with this movie, how intentional it is. But I think there's just a strangeness to the movie that clearly,
and that it's not going to tell you all the answers, and that there's going to be missing pieces or gaps, and that's part of it. I mean, that's the part of it, is that because there's a tendency in horror to like justify or over-explain certain things. Even Psycho, masterpiece that it is, falls into that category a little bit at the end. Although I will say, I think at the end of that, what it is dealing with is so transgressive for 1960 that it felt like it needed to drop a few breadcrumbs for people to really grapple with what that was. But again, that the missing gaps of a movie like this are not frustrating as much as they are charming and make it feel like it's, if not, I wouldn't say the word smarter than you, but ahead of you. And that it's not going to tell you everything, because that would ruin part of the spell of the movie.
And that's all of the intention of David Lynch as a filmmaker, is that idea of not telling everybody what everything means in his movies. So
also, I mean, in the more immediate, George Romero, of course, Night of the Living Dead, and that's interesting to bring into talking about what 60s horror represented at the end of the decade. That's obviously was a huge kind of cult movie success for its day. And I feel like a lot of the camera work and a lot of that black and white cinematography that Romero uses in that first Dead movie is reflective of some things here.
Yeah, and I think just in general, and about that movie, just the idea of, okay, I'm going to go out and make a movie too. I don't know when George Romero saw Carnival of Souls. But assumedly he would have had to have seen it obviously before 1966 or 7, because that movie took a while to make. Night of the Living Dead, it was over some years. But that I would assume he would have seen it, and that would have been an inspiration for him to go make the movie.
Yeah.
Among other things. But also, I think just having recent, and obviously a lot of people talk about the way that the ghouls look at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Is very reminiscent of
zombie-like,
and it looks a lot like the zombies in
Yeah.
Night of the Living Dead. But also, it's very obvious to say, but it reminds me a lot of the amusement park.
Romero movie,
not only in the fact of its setting, but also the sense of isolation and desolation,
and the feeling of being amongst a crowd,
right,
yet feeling utterly alone.
Right, and so I think that and death is literally shown as an entity in that. So I think that is its own influence that has been kind of remained unseen for many years that I think should be added to his love of this movie.
Yeah.
As part of that.
Even what the movie we did last week, Beetlejuice, I think somebody had mentioned in some of these retrospectives in 89, I think, when some of them were written, that Beetlejuice had only been a year old, and I think one or two people pointed out, hey, the Beetlejuice even shares a certain
and it looks like Herk Harvey, right. Yeah, and just that feeling of, and also the transience and of that kind of transitory. Are we halfway to heaven or halfway to hell? How long is this going to last? I mean, that's the whole question, And I was very interested to see this talking about as purgatory. A lot of people talked about like, what is this movie? Where is it? Literally. I don't actually have an opinion on that.
Yeah, because I was actually, after having read those, I was more so than any other time was thinking about the logic of the movie,
right,
and was thinking, okay, so what is this? Again, hell, heaven, purgatory, where are we? Earth, just in general.
Or is it all like this flash before her eyes before her death?
Yeah, that was also brought up, I think. And I think this is what the power of cinema is, and art in general, is that whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what it is.
It's about giving you a feeling, and it's about you thinking through where you yourself, when you see a movie like this, where you're like, what does this make me feel? How do I fit into this?
Yeah.
Not in a selfish way of like, it has to be about me, but just seeing yourself reflected through something else. That, again, weirdly, I don't think about that at all with like where this is, in quotes.
And normally I do with a lot of movies, but in this one I really don't. It's surprising that I just accept it on what it is, because even a movie like Lost Highway, I try to put more effort into what that movie means than this.
Well, another thing I think with that movie, too, is that it more immediately resembles our, quote, real world.
Right.
And so that more naturally begs questions like that to take place, even though it in of itself also takes some huge leaps of plausibility.
I mean, we've met before, haven't we? I mean... at your house.
And then, in a movie like this, too, I think just represents kind of a success story of independent film. And independent film, in general, has a huge spectrum of things to talk about. But every so many decades, you get like, because even at this time, and this is always a reminder for me that, as cynical as we can be about film now in 2021, that there's always the unexpected. There's always people working at the margins, working really hard to get something seen. And that, even in the early 60s, there was a lot of cynicism of a lot of people of like, oh, what, quote, mainstream Hollywood film is. If you've seen these movies coming from Europe or from Asia, they're not nearly as, the movies here are not nearly as interesting as them. And this is just a kind of a good example of like homegrown cinema throughout the country of like, hey, just because American cinema does not wholly consist of, quote, Hollywood cinema, even though many people see those two things as synonymous. That Herk Harvey and his hard work on a movie like this is an example of what independent film can be. And that even independent film, I mean, technically the Corman movies are independent film. But, and as much as I like some of those, is AIP biker movies, especially later, but all of those exploitation-y movies or genre movies, a lot of them, they kind of reach, this is successful, so then we kind of categorize that into a clear-cut genre, and then that has these very clear, even though it's independent in quotes, satisfy certain expectations. A movie like this literally comes out of the shadows, out of the ether itself, and there is no clear expectations of what it exactly was trying to be, other than in and of itself, maybe make some money, be a success. Certainly didn't make the money in the day, but in terms of the success that it's garnered over all these decades, undoubtedly it has been a success.
And what's interesting is that we're going to watch the trailer here in a few moments, which I haven't ever seen, but that a lot of these movies were sold under the idea of you've never seen a movie like this, the macabre, the murder, the violence, and it's just like
a lot of the Hitchcock movies really excel.
And especially the further, it's funny because actually the further down you get into the muck and the trash of movies like this, like the movie Something Weird Video puts out, like those basically softcore pornography movies, stuff like that, where it's like just trailers I've seen for stuff like that, and it's like the most gruesome thing. Like you've never seen this batch of inhumanity. Yeah, and it's like if all these movies are being sold on this is this new experience. I mean, even a lot of movies do this, so it's not just this, but even the original Dune movie. Yeah. I mean, literally the tagline for that one is "A world beyond your experience, beyond your imagination." It's wanting to be like, you've never seen a movie like this. Now with the new one, I think I've seen different ones. Some are just, let's say, it's just the beginning, like the end of the movie of Dune. But it says, beyond fear, destiny awaits. Like, you know. Yeah. But especially in the 50s and 60s, and part of that, too, was because TV was a thing. And it's like, you can't go anywhere else but the movie theater to see something like this, that kind of
because
attitude.
The TV will still pull certain punches, and the movie is still this more religious experience.
So it's interesting. I'll be interested to see the trailer and see if that does that with this. I don't know. But that the movie, even in the movie itself, doesn't really push itself too hard to be like, look at what this is. It's just like, this is what it is. Like, and do whatever you want with it. Doesn't really matter. You'll leave the movie, and that'll be it. The movie will be over. Yeah. Now I am seeing the tagline for the movie is "She escaped death. Now it wants her back."
Yeah. That's a good.
At least it wasn't like you've never, because a lot of old movie taglines are like a new experience. That's all it is. Half these. So
what's 2001's? It's something very
something like that,
big and evocative, kind of like
Let me
that.
Look. Well, I think one was called the Ultimate Trip, because I know that was sold because a lot of people went to go take
LSD.
Drugs. Yeah. So I know that was partially sold in that sense, but I think that works even in the movie itself, and I feel like it fits the moment of it's hip, like take a trip, you know. But
that apparently the box office,
the doors of perception, baby.
The box office for that movie apparently was struggling so much that they were like, it kind of got saved by dopers and fiend.
Dopers,
acid
we
heads
have all the stuff you need.
In the late 60s. Yeah. So it kind of like, we'll lean into that crowd because they, and so And I think I'd heard stories too of, go on a random 2001 tangent, but that some people were going to see that movie at in '68, been 1, 2 in the morning, taking acid, watching it, and said it'd be 4:30, 5 o'clock almost when you're seeing the Stargate sequences, and people's felt like their eyes were bleeding, and they're having these realizations that God is dead, and just all this crazy, insane leaps of logic people are making watching something like that. Right. This movie again, it is black and white, and I just love certain eras of black and white horror that something like this creates, and that it adds this just extra layer of kind of spookiness to it that Harvey excelled at with this. As far as why we're doing this, why are we concluding Spooktober Spooktacular, first annual Spooktober Spooktacular with this?
It's good.
It's good for one thing. You could just say that and move on.
Yeah, right.
But it is something that, while within film, cinephile circles, has a reputation. I think most people probably still don't really know about this movie, and it's just yet another way to shine the spotlight onto it.
Well, and what's funny,
it's super available. It's public domain. You could go find this on YouTube.
It's one of the most available movies that exists, and that's what's funny about it, is that one of the last things I want to say about this before we move into the movie is that I showed this to our parents couple years ago.
Yeah.
And what's funny was there was this, I forgot what it was called now. I feel bad. There was this show that came out of Charlotte somewhere that was like a late night show on Saturday nights where they would show a lot of older movies.
Which that was a big thing back then.
Yeah,
I think Ernie Anderson was Paul Thomas Anderson's father was one of the first guys to do that. Gouliardi.
Gouliardi. I'm sorry. Not Svengoolie. That's its whole own other stupid thing. No. Goulart, yes.
And then Elvira, I guess, was a version of that.
Yeah, and even Grandpa Munster.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there were versions of that type of thing. I think this one was a little more vague. Like, it wasn't specifically horror host material. It was more just like, here's some old movies that you might say. But I think that they said that they remember seeing this movie on TV.
Well, that's how a lot of
people,
people, apparently, the cult around it started, it was that type of movie that was shown.
But I showed them the movie, and they really like it. My mom our mom really loves it, actually, a lot. Because I told her we were doing it. She's like, oh, I really like that, you know.
Yeah.
And so so there were people that saw it that way, and I think they speak to that, and they were like, yeah, I think I kind of remember that, because at first they were like, I've never seen that, and then as they watched it, it's kind of like you said, that feeling of being up late, and even for Mom especially, she would have been a child, seeing it at the time, and to remember that, I'm sure that was a very interesting kind of experience for her to be watching the movie and be remembering it. It's already dreamlike anyway. And it's almost like deja vu, I'm sure, for her to be rewatching.
That's what I'm saying is a movie like this and Detour thrive on that like half-remembered quality of it. It literally it gets to that whole that when people fetishize this sometimes to an annoying extent, but I think with a movie like this it works of like films as dreams, films as like explosions from the subconscious. I feel like a movie like this is. And something like Detour is, and they work that way. And I think that's one reason why both those movies have had these reputations many, many years, that certain movies that are way more polished and way more money are not nearly as evocative as, say, these type of movies are that do that. And again, there's a lot of trash, a lot of independent horror trash, a lot of independent noir, anything. But hey, guess what? You dig through long enough, you'll find some...
Because I mean, this is I've got that DVD set that's like 50 horror movies, and it's like all these like public domain, and like the best way, the Bat. Not even the silent movie one, the Vincent Price night, which I kind of beat the drum for that movie. That
the ending,
one, that ending is the funniest thing. You'll never write it moment.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe we'll do that on here one of these days. Who knows? We're really hurting. But that there's only a few movies on there that are truly transcendent. This. Night of the Living Dead, Nosferatu, and Metropolis. Everything else are just like these crappy, like oh, this stupid, awful movie, like whatever. And it's like this movie sat there on that for years, and I was like, Carnival of Souls, oh, I have no clue what that is. And then I think it was Cinemassacre, James Rolfe, who does Monster Madness, he did this on there back 2015, I believe, because I think that's when I watched it for the first time. What did it, and I was like, oh, that looks like an interesting movie, and I finally watched it, and so that kind of compelled me to do it.
Yeah.
But it's just an unassuming movie and an unassuming list of movies, but thankfully it's at the top of the heap because people know it to be now.
Yeah.
But it was was that group of people in the past that gave the time to watch it and said, hey, have you seen this? And kind of that word of mouth of it, I think that has got it to being right here on the most important podcast in the world. No, just kidding. I mean, it is to us, so...
Yeah, it's the most important podcast you're listening to right now.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Unless you're listening to two.
It's like telling you're my favorite third block class.
I do that all the time, yeah. And one kid finally is like, I guess that means we're your least favorite third period, right? And I'm like, I guess so, yeah. And then, Anyways, so, maybe you're one of my third block kids. Reese Todd, if you're listening. I know you listen, okay? We're going to go ahead and take a brief break. We're going to hear the trailer for Carnival of Souls, and we're going to get right into the movie.
Hey, you want to drag, huh? Rev it up.
Action you've never seen races across your screen as you thrill to a new dimension in picture making. Carnival of Souls. This is the shocking story of a who crawled from the river to race through a nightmare, walking a tightrope between heaven and hell. From the unreal, she crashes through to reality. But try as she will to lead a normal life, she is torn from her goal. There's no privacy in a life she's ever watched, tormented. Either it's her neighbor, desirous of her physically, watching her with his leering eye, or it's the evil eye of the man who taunts her, the man who wants her. From the bottom of the river they come. They reach for her. They demand that she dance with them at the Carnival of Souls. She is a girl driven mad by the relentless forces of the beyond. He will not relent as he comes for her again and again. She whirls between the real and the unreal, trying to cling to life.
I like being with you, really I do. I don't want to be alone tonight. I want to be near you.
Honey, you don't want to go in there all by yourself, do you?
But she must watch herself in death. She must dance at the Carnival of Souls held just for her. For they have come for her for the last time, claiming her as one of their own. Carnival of Souls arouses such emotion that the management has been forced to state positively no refunds. Carnival of Souls is the shocker of all time, guaranteed to sweep you into a new dimension of picture making. You can't afford to miss Carnival of Souls.
And here we are. We're back. That trailer literally fit in exactly to what Levi
I had
was
no clue
predicting.
that
I haven't seen it either,
a new dimension in picture making. I mean, it's hilarious.
Positively, no refunds.
Yeah, and it's like, I can't even remember what all it said. It was all the same stuff. I mean, it's like, you know, yeah, it just was what it was. By the way, I just talked to our mom about that. It was called Those Were the Years, and it played at 11:30 on Friday nights, that show, and she thinks that's where she saw it. So
Those Were the Years.
Yeah. So anyway.
So every kind of metropolitan market probably had their own version of that or licensed it because, you know, New York very famously had hosts and LA did, I know. And then again, I think Ernie Anderson, I think he came out of Cleveland originally. So every little territory had their own version of that. I guess, you know, another version of that whole thing was what's the guy? He does for TNT. He did it, and now he's on Shudder.
Joe Bob Briggs.
Joe Bob Briggs.
Yeah.
I don't know if he started off doing that or if he was just an actor who they hired to do the
I'm not really
TNT stuff. But anyway, so we're watching the Criterion Blu-ray of this. But as we said, it's widely available. Probably the most available movie we've done so far.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this movie did get an official PG rating in the 90s.
Yeah,
but it's kind of a non-rated movie. Yeah, but anyway.
So we're hitting play in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Now, of course, this is showing the Criterion logo first, so it's going to be a little bit off sync for you.
Unless you watch it also with Criterion.
Yeah, but it is on the Criterion channel.
Yeah.
Right now, so. Okay, now you would start it.
No,
hang on.
Yeah, still got
wait. Gotta get the
wait,
Janice film.
Wait.
All right. Probably about now.
There.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Yeah. Hertz Line International.
No, we don't have the MGM line, but we have the Hertz line. You know?
Now, one of the most abrupt openings to a movie. It's just like, the movie's, here it is.
Oh, well, turn on the subtitle, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll do it.
So starting off with a little drag race, you know.
Tire squealing.
Come for the drag race, stay for the drag it leaves you in at the end of the movie, you know.
Don't be a drag, just be a queen.
Yeah. As Miss Hasaguchi herself wants to say.
Interesting, of course, how the movie, a lot of the dialogue is, especially in the early part of the movie, is all re-recorded.
Yeah.
You can tell.
So this looks like it could be shot in Kansas.
Yeah.
Middle of nowhere farmland.
Even though, oh, hang on, we gotta stop. Oh, no, they're still there. Okay. That abrupt cut.
Yeah. And that is something that this movie in general, movies like this, independent movies, can have this more homemade look and feel to it that sometimes Hollywood, for as good as they are, can be a little too, quote, polished.
Yeah.
It almost looks intentional, like, you go over, like, it bumped them the way they did.
See, this is kind of a Beetlejuice moment.
Mm-hmm.
Except they're the dog. They're the dog. Y'all the Duke. We said a lot of that during the movie yesterday. referencing, of course, a movie that isn't all that good, Escape from New York.
Yeah. Good title card.
I'm sure you've heard a lot of blasphemy on here out there today, certain people. I mean, the movie isn't good. I don't know what you want to say about it. So
we like Carpenter, though.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Kurt Russell. But...
It ain't a really bad movie either. I just didn't really like it, but yeah. Y'all the Duke.
Even the titles are weird. Featuring colon with colon. Like, that's not how credits usually work. But...
And Boozer.
Steve Boozer.
Good old Steve Boozer. Sharon Scoville.
And I wonder to the extent to which the actors in this, like, how many of them genuinely wanted to act professionally and they thought this could be their way to do it, or if they were just, like, doing it as a side project.
Well, some of the, I think the editors of the movie were acting in the movie, too. Harry Styles, George Corn. Wow. There's a name.
Yeah. Interesting music alongside of written.
Yeah, we forgot to, of course, mention the music in the movie is a big part of the
a lot of organ,
the atmosphere, of the movie.
Produced and
the sex appeal of the movie.
Harvey. Yeah. Herk, you hear that name often.
That guy's voice reminded me of the. That guy in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre owns the barbecue place.
Yeah.
There's Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah, it looks like him. Yeah, you can't tell this is re-recorded.
So he's lying about
what happened.
The race, Erie, Oregon. This is that era when nobody had anything to do.
Yeah.
Nobody really worked
the whole
definitive
town just
hours.
stopped and people just walked over and
Right. And it isn't that they didn't work and have jobs, but they just there wasn't definitive hours almost. It was just like, well, whatever, we'll just go do this.
Go hang down by the creek for a little while. Dig a car out. So she survived, or did she?
We were like, we got trapped on the bridge. I couldn't shake him. I mean,
from The Godfather, the game.
She ran out, tried to get away. Sorry, Monk. I lost her. We'll talk about that eventually. That whole game. But like I'm kind of meaning when I talk about intention or coincidence, is that a movie like this succeeds in its weirdness of being an independent movie, but was that were some of those choices intended to be that?
Well, being
weird?
The narrative what it is, that it kind of deals with the supernatural and, this ethereal quality, it kind of lets it get away with some of
that's
the
what I'm saying.
elements.
So it allows that, but like I said, I question whether or not that was totally intentional or not.
Sometimes that's just magic at the movies. It's just sometimes it just works out that way and it feels ideal and wasn't necessarily meant to be. But again, that goes back to the whole death of the author idea that, well, after a certain point, it's like owned by quote audiences, and they can't say they intended this or that. It's ultimately what was communicated and what was felt on its own. So get you a little match on action there.
He's like, I know what to do. Watch me. He's like, dang, would she be quiet? That's a really random job for her to have.
Yeah.
I'm an organist. And it's weird. It's like, did she ever really have that job? Or,
right.
You know, it's like kind of an unanswered question, obviously. Or is this something she's just imagining that she did?
Probably an excuse just so you put some of the action in these churches and also have the music be what it is. I've never been overly in love with the organ sound myself.
I haven't either. It depends.
Yeah. I mean, somebody who's been raised in Southern Baptist churches my whole life, I've heard a lot of them, but piano I don't like a lot. But seems like a very old-timey, antiquated instrument in some ways, but still being used. You ain't taking the coward's way out, are you?
There's nothing I can do here. I love this kind of parting moment with her. She's, I'm never coming back. Look. It's like, oh, what?
Very definitive, very decisive on that.
Obviously, this looks really good. Because I've seen some crappier versions of it, you know. And
I think this was a new 4K restoration that was done for this. So.
You see her rolling.
They hating. They trying to follow her through the whatever realm this is in. Whatever realm this is in. Whatever realm this is in. You know that old song.
I mean,
I love that music.
Should have been like lighters in the dark in the middle of a rock show.
Whoa!
A barefoot blue jean night tonight. Or that
it's
song,
like some High Sierra area. Big Shot Roy Earl.
Abracadabra, gonna reach out and grab you. Talking about the getting touched by a velvet glove. Switch clicks. Love a lot of these movies have a real like riding in style in the new Chevrolet, like America.
In the new 1963 Chevrolet.
America.
It's like, get the new top-down convertible. Perfect for, going through the streets of Dallas, Texas. On a, it's just like, whoa.
On a Friday in November.
Yeah. That'd be not a good idea.
In front of your unimpressed electorate. Like, or certain portions of it, anyway. Who knows? Ending this now. Moving on.
Might be returning to that topic sometime soon. Who knows?
There it is.
Oh, yeah.
Daggum thing.
That's what I love, about... we'll see this moment here.
The thing she looked over there to show, there's nothing over there.
Yeah, gotta establish it.
But there he is now.
the logic of movies sometimes, like, oh yeah, we can shoot this in Lawrence, Kansas, or in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Yeah,
it's just a
doesn't
drive
matter.
away,
Yeah.
and just it works it works for us as an audience because who cares,
Like he was standing on the road.
Yeah.
Like
in the middle of a rock show,
That's what this movie needed, was a real like down home rock and roll scene. Like, like this is rock and roll music in the 60s. Like
that's what they say.
Yeah. It's like in BoJack Horseman, it was real like, this is a pop song from 2007. Like some of those like stuff. There it is again. You again. Some weird land.
Yeah.
This actor here is probably like Herk Harvey's like uncle or something. Like
guy who owed him some money.
Yeah. You ever get not even frustrated, but kind of like, oh yeah, he probably knew him real well, or something. You know what I mean? It's like everybody in the movie is like not being paid, and like, oh, do this for me, please. Like, it's like that kind of attitude.
It always just strange to me that there was a time where, like, it was just expected that the gas station attendant would actually fill up your gas for you. It's very weird to me. Carnival of Souls, they called it.
It's a really weird shot. Like, oh, you like it? Like,
you like what I made?
It's interesting. And she's like, oh, I could have gotten more money yesterday, but I knew you'd like it. But that shot before, where it's like real unexpected kind of movement, like the whole shot is a normal, okay, and that's like, oh wait, what? It's like very like purposefully disorienting.
Well, stay a while. Let's come to how long it's been since you've been alive. It's been a while. Like,
a little strange performance from that woman. It's like, could have
That's
rented it
always,
yesterday if I wanted to. Like,
that's always you sink or swim with like non-professional actors because at their worst sometimes they can just not hit a line and just be very flat, but on their best they can just give a very non-practiced genuine performance that sometimes professional actors a little too technical or a little too polished. This guy just won't leave her alone.
That felt kind of like that moment in Halloween, the original, where it was like in the midst of the bed sheets. A real bed sheet freak-a-leak. Whatever that even means.
Yeah. So what I'm curious about is like, so her being an organ player, that's like a professional job, like that she gets paid money to do, like in a church. Like, I don't understand.
That's kind of the whole point, where it's like.
But I also got the feeling that might have been a thing back then too, though. Like,
yeah.
absolute necessity, I don't know what some of the ladies will say.
If they say I'm a fine organist, that should be enough, shouldn't it?
Well, yes, of course. We'll let it go at that for the time being. But, my dear, you cannot live in isolation from the human race, you know.
Why not?
Mind if I try this now?
I want you to.
This is I want nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Pay me my money. Organ. Sacred.
Every organ sacred.
The manse. What is that?
That putting on the manse. I suppose the Ritz. But she don't care about that. Yeah, whatever.
Eerie. Okay.
Well, here he is. He's back.
Look at you. All puffed up.
All weird and dead.
It was a weird kind of walk back.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to make a call out past the lake. Would you like to come along for the ride? Go right by it. Stop and look at it if you like.
I would, with you along.
Or for us, this area would be like the Lenore Mall here in Caldwell County. Just like what once was, filled with pageantry and
no
grandiosity.
audible dialogue. Yeah. It's like the Lenore Mall, like, okay.
For long, that might be Daggum Valley Hills Mall, because they've had a random amount of stores that have closed in recent years, too. The whole mall phenomenons.
Yeah.
I guess going a little bit down the tubes.
This used to be quite a place. It's been deserted for a long time now.
Will you take me in?
My goodness, no. It isn't safe out there anymore. That's why they put up this barrier.
It'd be very easy to step around it.
What attraction could there be for you out there?
I'm not sure. I'm a reasonable person. I don't know.
Yeah, anybody who's a reasonable person definitely says on a regular basis, I'm a reasonable person.
Yeah.
Would you take me out there?
No. The law has placed it off limits. Wouldn't be very seemly for a minister to break the law, would it?
No. Maybe I can come back some other time.
Shall we go along now?
So weird, like, I don't want to see what's in there, like, ain't nothing in there, like.
That's a question to ask about her in this movie, is how often she's inviting death or inviting a deathly presence into her midst, by even wanting to go to a place like that.
And it showed, he was in there.
Yeah.
That man.
The star of the show coming down the steps.
What?
That new phrase, kick in the head.
Yeah.
I always thought that was the weirdest phrase anyways. Ain't that a kick in the head? Like, who's doing that?
That's a very kind of David Lynch thing about she keeps repeating about,
Yeah.
I don't care about the baths. Like,
Yeah.
I heard about you. Like,
that's too. I didn't even really think about like the manner of performance. Sometimes the
Yeah.
similarities some of that shares with Lynch's stuff.
or this. Yeah.
Now, one of the reviews just said something about the whole idea of like her being in the bathroom.
Yeah.
How scandalous that would have been pre-Psycho, but wasn't as big of a deal at this point, even 2 years later. But still.
What even is back there? Yeah. He reminds me of somebody I know that I'll tell you later who it is. I don't really know him all that well.
Do I know him?
No.
Okay.
Somebody I've met in the past few months, that's all I'll say.
Oh, okay. Creepo.
It's a randomly scandalous moment for 1962, but this freak.
Until he loved going to Lolita 5-6 times.
Yeah. Lolita 5,000.
Being neighborly and all.
Wow.
How does that matter?
Freak. It's funny, there's like a video you can find online of like those two and Harvey all got back together for like a Q&A in the 80s.
Yeah.
And how they look like the same people. They had just aged
older,
like, it was just kind of weird.
And Harvey, he died in the mid to late 90s, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
96, I think.
Okay. As I said before, it's really good and heartwarming to know that he at least lived to see this movie be a cult success as he sees her now, creepily. But
he's and he just walks away.
No, I'm done. Just want to let you know I'm still down here. If you're ready to,
ready to come along or what? It's Anton Chigurh.
Yep, I was just thinking like No Country for Old Men.
Stilgar. He gave his moisture. That's moisture for the dead. Death for the dead.
Why you be weird?
She reminds me of somebody that we both know.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about it later too. If you want to know who that is, email us at HuffmanBrothersProductions@gmail.com and we won't tell you.
Maybe we will, though, because we ain't really got any emails so far, so it's time to break the ice, you know what I mean? Other.
Really, brother, I've been there. Can you get those chicken crates out of the bed?
Out of the bed.
Can you get those chicken crates out of the bed?
You know, houses, they're big enough so that you could hide a man in every corner.
So I'm just imagining seeing a man there then, is that what you're saying?
Just gotta not let your imagination run away. Are you going out to work? Of course.
Almost looked like a freeze frame for a second there.
Yeah.
Freeze frame!
Terrible song.
Yeah, pretty dumb.
I would say sorry if you like it, but I'm not.
Apologize to yourself. You know.
That is stupid of a song as Girls on Film. Like, what?
That's what we're seeing right now. Women
Yeah.
on film.
Girls on Film.
I'm always mystified by people that's true for. Coffee doesn't really keep them awake.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, that's what coffee does to me.
Yeah. Just like, I'm alive. People do not just vanish.
I think another thing too is just like, I feel like we as an audience, even the first time you see this, kind of know where this is quote going in a roundabout way, and so much of the movie's about the waiting and the desire and the dread also of all that, you know.
I always remember that shot of the camera zooming out into the like. It's like it keeps showing beyond and beyond to those like mountains, and it's like what's supposed to be out there. I don't know.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about the purgatory idea of this, and if that's the case, they talked about it in that Criterion essay that it's like even if it is purgatory, but there's nothing that she's learning to get any better. It's like there's no, even if it is that, it's like okay, well,
yeah,
you just suffer until it's over.
We'll just come right on in.
A lazy person.
Two cups of
coffee coming up. Weirdo.
Yeah, he's a odd duck.
You know, Kyle, I think there's something going on in this movie. Like something ain't right.
I don't know. It's one of my favorite recurrent bits of myself. Like,
works in a warehouse. Wow.
Shocked because I took a job in a church, and I regard it simply as a job. I'm a professional organist, and I'd like to play, that's all. Thinking like that, don't that give you nightmares?
this movie isn't talked much about in terms of like, or was a statement on religion, but it's interesting to think about because her character's clearly not really religious and doesn't really put much stock in religion or Christianity, and everyone's always shocked or weirdly perturbed by that about her, you know. It's interesting.
We warned you. Like so up front, sleaze bag. There was one of those reviews I read said something about a particular type of sleaze. It said called him. You remember that? It was something like that. Like that person that called Leatherface a squealing obese goon. Like it's like okay.
Excuse me. Brazilians.
Coffee, bean to snake oil.
Snake oil.
Like coffee beans, okay. Snake oil, what?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, I get it.
What's the matter?
What's the matter?
Can't talk with a gun in your mouth.
I just like to start the day off in a good mood, that's all.
You must be hilarious by noon.
Look, I'm just the kind of a guy employers want. You know, the happy worker. Come on for a night. Make your morning happy.
Well, they're hiring. They need good help nowadays, you know.
Even if y'all are coming to work drunk. It used to be that bartenders could drink on the job.
Yeah.
Now that's illegal, but... Well, what?
Oh, yeah, I hate it too. Go ahead and leave, though. How about that?
You got the wrong impression of me.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Mr. Linden, but I'm sure you have to get to work.
What about you?
No, I have the whole day free for shopping.
Very pleasantly, like, get out.
Does the hem hang right and back? We might change the hemline a little. The drape is just fine. Otherwise, it looks very nice. I'm sure it isn't very chic to take the second dress, but I like it. We alter a little here straight all the way around.
I'm one of them people that puts something on once, and
It
I'm
fits.
like, all right, I'm done. Ain't gonna try on a million daggum things. I hate shopping. I know everybody said all men say that, but you know, I'm just like,
I don't hate it as much as most
clothes
guys
shopping. Clothes shopping, I don't mind, but shoe shopping, oh my god, no,
I don't like that as
I
much.
hate it. Like, do you understand how I feel about it? Everybody out there in TV land.
Everybody out in Erie, Oregon land.
Everybody out in Pod Save America land. But yeah, clothes shopping itself, I don't mind that as much, even though that kind of annoys me. But I don't know, it's just like, it sounds lazy, but just the effort it takes to put on clothes, take them off, put them on, take them. I'm just like, I want to get done with this. I'm sick of this crap. Like, well, I'll just wear smocks all the time or something. Just like, whatever. Like.
Yeah, that'll work.
It's like freaking out, and it's just like, just open the thing, dadgummit, like.
I believe I'll have you deliver the dress if you don't mind. I did say I'd take it.
And then all of a sudden, she's not being seen by her.
That old bag.
What's the matter with her? What's the matter with everyone?
What's the matter with me?
Why don't they answer me?
What is going on with that guy?
Yeah.
He might be the department store detective or something.
Yeah.
The hotel detective, he was an a saint. Like, moment. You know what I mean?
Yep. I got that same feeling sometimes.
Still got a lot of that mucus from that cold a couple of weeks ago. And it was a cold. It wasn't COVID. Meanwhile, can't even hear that.
Jackhammers, you can't hear.
I love they only had that just so it could be like, well, first of all, they could just go out and film it, and secondly, that it's like, well,
that would be loud.
That way, yeah, just show the,
What is going on? She's thinking. Bird twittering, but is it tweeting?
Yeah. This character, that guy, was like a David Lynch character, I think. You know what I mean? It's just like weird, like. Watch that, man. Look at it's literally David Lynch. Looks like David Lynch too, kind of.
Had a fright.
You've had a fright. Free for a moment. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, baby, go.
Can I come with you now?
Certainly. I'll take her over to my office. We'll see that she's all right.
All right.
It's more than just not being able to hear anything. No contact with anyone. It was as though for a time I didn't exist. As though I had no place in the world. No part of the life around me.
And then you saw this man.
It's funny that's like setting up for the reveal later in the movie.
Yeah.
About him being turned around.
Yeah, because that shot was very specifically that, and then it showed it from another angle until he's behind there. But,
This is a very, I said, educational film scene of like, the mind is a terrible thing to waste. Like, I love that background out the window, how just like stock and fake it looks. It's like almost purposeful, you know.
I didn't say that. I don't mean that.
I'm a competent person. Anything I'm a realist, I'm not guilty of imagining anything.
Hogwash. All of us imagine things. Have you ever heard two men talking behind your back and imagine they were talking about you? Have you never imagined you saw someone you knew and walked up to them and found they were a perfect stranger?
I don't see what this has to do with it.
The point is this. Our imaginations play tricks on us. They often misinterpret what we see and hear. You agree?
Do you agree? Don't you? Like,
am I not right?
Yeah, it's like, what are you gonna do? Pull a gun on me? Like, don't you agree? Like, I'm writing my dissertation. So I'm writing my dissertation. You must agree. Like, I need you as a source. I need you on this.
Need you to vet the grammar here.
Have you always felt this way? Don't you want to join in the things that other people do? Share the experiences of other people?
I'm going to proofread it out loud to you. Listen, like, is when discussing the mind, one must immediately first begin with Charles Dickens' The Pickwick Papers. Like, this is the most random thing I can think of. Different than Bleak House. Like. Aren't you?
Aren't you?
The words of Jimmy Stewart, aren't you?
This guy seems like a guy that you've seen in a bunch of movies before, but haven't ever seen before, really. Just vague, Arbogast-esque figure, you know, like.
Arbogast.
If it is all my imagination, I can
Maybe, but at least someone should be with you. Now, I can't
As you
possibly
say,
get
Doctor,
around.
I'm a person of strong will. When the time to go out, there is none. And if I have to, I can go alone.
I will do nothing to stop you. I am a lazy fool. I'm a stupid, no good fool.
So I'm going to this place by hook or by crook. Nobody's stopping me.
Offense.
Picnic Bowery.
Okay.
What's they building in there? Which finds Tom Waits hiding in the shadows.
I mean, if they ever made a remake of this, which they did, but it wasn't as much like this anyway.
When was that made?
In like the 80s or 90s. I think it's the early 90s. Anyway, he should have been the guy.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You think somebody else would have remade this by now, like Guillermo del Toro or something.
Yeah. Give him time. He might.
I probably just spoke it into existence. I apologize. I keep seeing the poster for that Nightmare Alley and just keep laughing about how awful it looks, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So. I mean, it looks like total trash. Let's just be honest. Like, all right. Don't you agree?
1998.
Don't you agree? That was a little later than I thought. This moment. A lot of question marks.
Yeah.
I think the sound of it hitting that actually happened a little bit before it actually hit it, but everybody's moving around. Everybody's moving around.
Saltwater bathing.
Stops. Stop it.
Reading a little bit about the 98 version. Said it has a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh yeah, nobody likes it. I think that guy.
Yeah, because it's produced by Wes Craven.
That guy that played that Sidney Berger guy, wasn't he in the movie? Is his name there somewhere? Like a cop or something.
Sidney Berger. See his name.
I thought there was somebody in this movie that had a cameo in that. Let me look. Maybe it isn't on Wikipedia. Yeah. The Mr. Linden guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it says he's credited as cop. So
cool.
Yeah, I think it's like remaking name only.
Yeah. Just why, you know?
What?
Just why do that, you know?
Oh, yeah, I mean, because of, you know.
Money grubbing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're about to come, baby.
There is something, you know, calm, peaceful, serene, but also scary about these big, wide open spaces like that, especially that are man-made and nobody's there, and you keep waiting for somebody to come around a corner and get you in places like that.
Meanwhile, he's in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like it was the purpose of that.
Yeah.
A moment.
Just, oh crap, he's here, and she don't know. Raise the temperature of the audience. And that she thinks she sees him here and there, but sometimes he's invisible even to her.
No, I'm going to aggravate you even more. You know, I got an offer to be in the remake of this thing. You want to come along? Say, I don't want to get randy with you, but That you clearly do, though, you know. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on there.
I'm not much for dancing.
Hey,
I won't know until I hear it.
What are you, afraid of men?
No, I'm not afraid of men.
You seem sort of cold. This morning when I brought you the coffee, friendly.
This morning I needed company.
Well, maybe you'll need company tonight. Better than walking home.
I just won't give up.
yeah,
bro.
he's just a total lecherous a-hole.
I should be finished around 9. Will that be all right?
That's okay by me. Say, I'll see you in church.
Maybe he should come early and stick around a while.
Sacred.
Yeah. Playing some of that do re mi, you know.
Yeah. One of those I am alive moment. Well, actually not, but I cannot control. Eerie.
I love good eerie. I said eerie a bunch of times so far on these subtitles. So there are other
cast out devils
associations an organ can make in eerie, but whatever. Well then,
I'm doing my impression of it right now. You couldn't see it.
It was special though. Should have been.
It's not as good as my impression is. We got 18 and Mountbatten, but you know. Your insurance will pay. Like. Is that Morticia Adams or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we watched Adam's Family Values last night, and how many shots are like key lights basically on her face that are like making her eyes look more pronounced. And
there's one moment where she even walked into the shot, into the light, like they didn't move it. It just was there.
Well, it was set up for her to get there.
And it was just like, that funny.
I bet that water tastes chunky.
It's always one of the creepiest shots ever.
Like you're gonna go kill Colonel Kurtz or something.
Yeah. All these other good folks.
I'll take your word for it. They look kind of weird to me, but
it's just who they are, you know. It's just who they want to be.
It's their overall vibe.
I just thought that's real weird about how fast they're moving.
Yeah.
Like,
like when it's like past midnight and you're watching this on TV, and you're like, oh, I was like,
here he comes. One of the great moments in any movie.
Yeah.
About how weird it looks. The look on his face. Got a smile on his face, for God's sake.
Profane sacrilege. What are you playing in this church? Have you no respect?
My good friend Ryan Davies and I like to say that all the time. Profane sacrilege. What are you playing in this church?
This organ, the music of this church, these things have meaning.
like all I did was like, you know, grind the pew like skateboarding wise. Like, what's the big deal? Like, just did a half pipe. Like,
In conscience, I must ask you to resign.
She's like, all right. Great organ classics for church. Whatever it says on one.
Turn your back on the church. There is help here, and I urge you to accept it.
Cool.
She's like, nope.
I'm out. And they're saying on Shark Tank, is like, and for all those reasons, I'm out.
And for all those reasons, I'm totally in. Well, they say all this awful
Yeah.
stuff, and it's like, oh.
This is immoral, it's selfish, it's wrong. For those reasons, I'm in.
You mean like morally?
You.
Swing.
I love that swing.
Like, look out. Movie's already almost over.
Times they've had together.
Ends. Like, it's over.
Like, no overtures, no. This is what it was really about. Just no, that's it.
Yeah. We know that already. This line delivery. Like, totally insane. This guy is a total sociopath.
Yeah. What? You've been holding out on kind of pig you usually drink? Well, like that guy ain't a farm animal
Quit
himself.
licking your chops. She's out of your class. I'll help you put it over. What?
Meta.
Didn't seem to enjoy my company much. That's not true. I really appreciate you taking me out this evening. I've had a miserable night of it.
Yeah, drink
Poor
up.
you.
Pour you a glass of vodka. Like, not a shot, a glass.
Imagine how desperate you have to be.
Yeah.
That you're like so freaked out. You're like, I have to be with this man. Ugh. Sleaze.
Primo sleaze.
Our mom would say disgust.
That's not creepy at all.
Freak. Don't push the chair in or nothing.
No, yeah.
That's why we're living in the world we are today.
Standards, you know, they just more and more by the wayside.
You could tell that was like the beginning of a shot. And they were like, go.
Yeah.
And it was like... Ooh, like, freak. Total soused. Like, soused louse. Are you going to be in there? No. Then, yeah.
Yeah, at this point, I think I'd rather be with Herk Harvey, take me away to wherever, versus be with this guy. But
well, here we go, coming up. He was like all the way over there.
Yeah.
He's like, love this reaction. This.
Yeah, I think too there had to be a lot of days he probably was just dressed up in that full makeup, directing.
Yeah.
Just off to the side, you know, ready to be in the shot if he needed to be.
Rocka.
For Rocka. That eerie organ again. Back at it. Reprieve. Reprieve. Reprise.
This shot out the window of her moving everything around. It's like insane.
Another thing is too, I don't really think we read much about, but we could be read into maybe his mental health stuff too, as far as with this character.
Not very much, I'm afraid.
I'm sure glad you just happened around. I was gonna call somebody, but I just had to talk to people.
You better call somebody. It's like a combination dinner, you know.
She's a strange one. She absolutely refuses my help. I can't say that I blame her. There's something about her that completely baffles me. I've urged her to call upon me if she feels she needs help, and I hope she will.
I can't let her stay in this house.
You won't have to worry about that. She's determined to leave the city, and she wants to get away as soon as possible.
I hope she does leave.
I hope she can.
What? I mean, I know that that will be the case, but why would he know that? I hope she can. Out if you can. You remember in House of, what's that? House of Games?
Yeah.
Whatever that bad movie was.
Oh yeah. Mammoth.
If you can. Well, that freak didn't come out. That freak-a-leak didn't come out to say goodbye.
No. All those times they had together too.
I
Not worried about it, I guess. Where we're going, we don't need week's rent. Like
car rattling. Well, she just slam right through it and just like whatever.
No rules, no laws,
and
no
like
limits.
The Stone Cold music started playing.
I mean, arguably she is already Stone Cold, you know? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would think they'd be like, no.
That's not safe.
That's not a good idea.
It's a different world back then.
Yeah, they're just like, whatever. It's a real have it your way kind of mentality. Like
the Burger Master.
I love Burger King's like, have it your way, and I'm like, okay, I won't eat there. That's my way.
Well, they say it's your way or the highway, so...
Well...
Your way and the highway.
Yeah, how about both?
Your way equals the highway.
Life is a highway.
I
want to ride it all night long. Oh my God. She's going to prank her dad.
I don't know her family background.
Her parents live in Benton.
No, it said that.
She said that earlier. I was like, oh, you're going to see your parents in Benton before you leave?
Other than that.
It was just like, get down from there. Like, what? And you're just walking down the street and this going on.
Yeah, if they did a remake of this in the 70s, Jenna Rollins would have played a perfect part for this.
Take a look. But like her attitude.
Yeah. Yeah, she sees Herk Harvey and staring at her. She's like, take a look.
Yeah. Why don't you get out of here? Quit following me around.
You crazy ghost or spirit. Like.
Which is important to know. Opening night is kind of a ghost story, so.
It's true. Also have John Cassavetes yelling, I am Superman. Like.
He would have to be the freak a leak.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
and then the apartment or her neighbor who's hitting on her, that's Seymour Cassell. Like,
yeah. Or Falk.
Cassavetes horror movie, that would have been interesting.
I said the closest I guess we ever got to that was opening night, but
yeah,
there are portions of that movie I think are like kind of horror movie tinged, other than even the ghost stuff. But.
Yeah. Eastbound bus.
No, loading. Gate 9. New shoes.
Chew. Back, 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 back.
Chew. Back, 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 back. Eat. Eat. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, does that make sense to you? faint chuckling. Like, we might be. This guy, that's that guy from earlier. Yeah. The weirdo.
The one weirdo in this whole movie.
That's a very kind of like dream-oriented idea of like, oh, you see other people, other places that you've seen already, and like,
that your mind can only get so creative and it has to recycle people. You get on that train.
No. Sure can't, baby.
He's that Dune voice, like.
Yeah. Give me the water. Yeah. Which I wondered in the book too what that would have sounded like. I thought of it as a more basic, like, Jedi mind trick. They're just saying it.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I thought it was funny the one time he did it, and the guy punched him and just, like, shut up.
Yeah.
Like, and then he finally did it right, and he was like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's able to do it a lot better than him. I need to use that on my students.
Yeah.
Sit down in your seat. And they're like, what? I might actually try that tomorrow. Just do that real weird. And they're like, look at... And they'd be so freaked out they'd just do it. Probably.
Yeah.
You know? I'm going to try that. If you hear on the news that something happened...
Just know that weird.
Yeah. And also, another reason to go see that movie in the theater is just because of how loud it is, and like it makes certain portions of it are very scary. It's like, okay.
And your seat's almost vibrating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, the whole shot that's who it is, like he's just waiting, like. The file. I wonder what's in the file cabinet.
Yeah. The skulls, the bodies. It's freaky for her to stare right at the camera while she screams.
Yeah.
Took a snooze, maybe.
Ain't gonna pay, I guess. No, hey, I can't believe that. This is the 60s.
People pay
for their services. Yeah. Like, no, they not anymore. They don't. Well, heck.
Well, darn tootin'.
Well, yeah. See, he's just saying, "Well, gosh," he shook his head.
Yeah,
like,
daggone.
The final visit.
Mm-hmm.
This is some of the best filmmaking of the movie, I think. Here are some of these shots. Ooh, like, ooh, spooky time, like,
spooky.
This is Halloween.
Halloween. Halloween. And get put, need to remake this movie in the Medea verse,
One of my roommates.
Hey, yo, pale, wasty ass doing in here,
Lex. Friend Liam, that was a roommate of mine. I remember it was Halloween morning.
Yeah.
We both had to get up early. He had to get up early for class. I had to get up early to go do a student teaching thing. and we were singing that song real loud. We were like,
This
is Halloween or whatever, and it was
Yeah.
like 6:30 in the morning. It was kind of early. I mean, real loud. And one of our other roommates, JR, just like opened the door and looked out like real pissed off because we woke him up. And I felt kind of bad about it, but I was also just like, hey, whatever.
Harvey in the back there.
Yeah.
That face.
But also, I'm just like, this is Halloween.
I mean,
like,
can you deny the validity of what you're saying? Like,
I love they're waiting, like, oh, hang on.
Wait a minute.
Well, we're going to dance in slow tempo. I mean, and then that roommate we woke up, he and I used to laugh all the time about the, I'm a clown with the tearaway face, here in a flash and gone without a trace. Creepy.
Creep show.
Or mom always like to say creepy peepee. Okay, well, I see you. Love how serious he's looking, dancing.
I mean, dancing serious business.
Is that the camera getting in the way?
Yeah,
at the top of the
like it.
shot. Weirdo.
Yeah, he ain't right, that boy. That shot looks like it's from the cover.
Yeah.
The cover they took from Criterion from that.
This is a really creepy shot here of them all running at the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me of those moments in Batman Forever when that guy's running.
Yeah.
You know, in
Yeah.
the
neon fight. Like,
yeah, that gang.
yeah.
I've always found having a stationary camera and having people run past it is a very like eerie
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, I mean eerie. This whole music is this whole movie. If only it was shot on Lake Erie, you know.
Yeah. Maybe next time.
What could have been, or Cape Fear. We already got one of them movies though. A couple actually.
A crack team of investigators here.
I mean, this is what the '60s had to offer, you know. He kind of looks like our grandpa, Lewis.
As Grandpa, yeah. Jason Robards.
Yeah, at least the pictures I've seen him. Anyway.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, why are we back here? Like, what happened? What's going on? This also kind of reminds me of the ending of Psycho, them pulling the car out of the water.
Yeah.
When she kind of blinked there, that other woman.
Yeah.
She dead.
The end. Or is it?
Well, Dune told us it's only the beginning.
That's true. So there you go. Carnival of Souls, very eerie, creepy
Harold
movie.
Harvey, and so his real name was Harold, I guess.
Harold Harvey.
Yeah. Pumpkinhead Harvey. Anyway. Yep. Carnival of Souls. There you go.
Great movie.
Yep.
Again, a lot's been made. Oh, what could have been if he would have made more movies?
Yeah.
But all we can do is judge what we have.
Yeah.
Obviously Charles Lawton also very famously only directed one movie himself, Night of the Hunter. But he, of course, had this big career as an actor.
That's also a very. That's clearly a much more of a studio movie, very mainstream movie. But it's a pretty weird kind of movie too in its own way.
It's obviously one of the most iconic Robert Mitchum performances.
It reminds
ever.
me of this movie in certain ways, a kind of ethereal nature to it. It's very obvious. It's very Southern Gothic, so it's kind
and the religious aspects of that are much more front and center and discussed. But so there you go. That brings an end to our first annual Spooktober Spooktacular. We've enjoyed taking a walk on the creepy side a little bit.
But Christmas is coming up.
Christmas is coming. It's like winter is coming,
Or like what Don once said on Mad Men, summer is coming. I can feel it in the air. I smell corn.
But before that, up next week, a little bit of an epilogue, not quite a spooky movie, but a movie that's horrific to say the least in its own way. 1971's A Clockwork Orange. 50th anniversary also this year of this movie. True. It was a big deal. Where to begin with A Clockwork Orange? First and foremost, it's our first Stanley Kubrick film. Stanley Kubrick's had a huge impact on both of our lives as filmgoers, I know. Clockwork Orange, is his most controversial movie he made. In the wake of 2001, The Space Odyssey. Came out in 71. 71 was, again, that was when the new Hollywood machine was starting to get really cranked up. Kubrick himself was notably, apart from Hollywood, new Hollywood or otherwise, at this time, he was working in England. From here, the rest of his career was earlier than that too. But
ever since Lolita, I think Lolita was the last movie he made in America. I believe so.
Yeah, from the '60s onward, really, he was.
And he never returned to America.
Yeah.
After
I heard he had New York Times. He still bought New York Times, and that he would have friends tape football games on VHS and send to him to watch here in America, which is fascinating. Anyways, other than Stanley Kubrick's living habits, we'll be getting into
and him reading the IBM manual, and talking about that.
Right.
But anyway,
but we're huge fans of Stanley Kubrick, and this is among our least favorite films from him. That's a common trait we seem to be doing with some of our more favorite filmmakers on here with Tarantino when we did Django Unchained. But Kubrick, Clockwork Orange is a movie that, as the years have gone on, I've come to respect more than I like. But it seems like a movie that intentionally doesn't want you to like it either. When you think of Clockwork Orange, what are some things that immediately come to mind for you?
I think that the first 15 minutes to 20 minutes of the movie are simply unparalleled amazing, actually. Basically everything up until the home invasion. I think that is one of the best openings to any movie, actually, I've ever seen. And then from then on, it
goes downhill.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because I think that movie goes up and down as it goes. There's parts of the movie I like, there's parts of the movies I really don't like. Most of the movie I don't really like, but there are parts of it I think are really interesting and really saying something. Well, the whole movie's really saying something, but I really like the ending. Billy Wilder once said, "You have a good beginning, you have a good end,
no bad scenes,
and you got a movie." And it's well, that isn't the case with The Clockwork Orange, but its opening and ending are good. But I think it's just one of those movies that a movie like that had to have been made. At some point. And
that book was also a huge deal.
The Anthony Burgess
and
novel,
famously resolves itself in a different way than the Kubrick movie does. And there's a lot of debate whether or not Kubrick intended to do that, or if he quote the wrong edition of the book in England or whatever. I'm not sure.
He had reformed, I think, a little more by the ending of the book. But I think it was an interesting movie to be made. That it's weird because it's kind of like a teen delinquent movie, but in England and in the future. And in the future, it's a weird, very weird movie,
and quite literally actually spawned some literal violence in England, and Kubrick actually had the movie pulled.
Yeah, the movie was banned in England for a long time too. Yeah, other than him pulling it, it just was not seen anywhere.
Just weird because as much as he's known as an American filmmaker, he's got a humongous fandom in Britain too.
And that movie is in England.
British,
it's a very British movie. So it, it's a movie that I don't really like at all, but I rewatch every so many years to try and get into the spirit of it, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. But I mean, it's an interesting movie about, fascism at that time, particularly, and kind of seeing that as a post-World War II phenomenon. I think it's an interesting pairing with something like V for Vendetta, which I think is quite a bit of a better version of what that's trying to be in certain ways, and has some genuine humanity thrown in. Because with those, and maybe we can talk more about this next week, but because I'm actually in the middle of kind of reading all of V for Vendetta at the moment. I haven't read any of it in a little while,
but Alan Moore,
right? Which I'm an Alan Moore fan, so but that
British dystopia
with that, and also just the fact that the difference I think between those is that with V for Vendetta it has some pretty genuine human characters, I think, that are wanting things to be better and are fighting against this fascist system. Whereas with A Clockwork Orange, it's kind of about trying to reform the anarchy
through fascism,
and so it's like this opposite kind of divide.
So what hell do you want?
Right,
you want the hell of the drugs, or do you want the hell of the institutionalized state?
So it's how
about neither? But
it's an interesting difference between those two things, and whereas in V for Vendetta, it's this question of that's about a nuclear issue that got them there, whereas with A Clockwork Orange it's much more vague, and kind of saying this is what it's been all along, which is a little more interesting in that.
But again, for a lot of people of an older generation, the youth culture of the 60s and 70s felt a lot like what the Droogs were, and so it feels like a very prescient time, of course, to that movie have been made. And then even now, I think to look on it about the angry urges of white men, young white men of a certain age, what we see now over and over again with domestic terrorism and all these shootings that we live with now, that it has something to speak to us today, even in certain ways as well.
And I think the most interesting thing about the movie is to take what's called, and it's a hypersexual movie too. That's another thing about it that kind of turns me off. But obviously it talks all the time about the ultra violence or whatever it talks about. But I think one of the most interesting aspects of the movie is to take the work of like Beethoven and to add this whole patina of just violence over that. I think is one of the most interesting things that he's actually ever done in his career.
Well, also Singing in the Rain,
that's the other big thing too, and that to take this kind of very popular mainstream music and to
muck it up,
right? And that's all with Singing in the Rain. That's supposed to be more satirical, whereas Beethoven, I guess the whole point of that in the movie is it's saying that is a release. That's his release of violence is through that music, and that's what that inspires in him or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a movie that we really like, but it's a movie we continue to try to work through. It's also interesting to see in the midst of all these other great movies he made, like Doctor Strangelove 2001. Then you have that. Then you have Barry Lyndon in The Shining.
All of those other ones, 5-star, unimpeachable masterpieces.
Yeah. So it's just interesting to have that ugly movie in the middle of all that, which almost makes me respect it more. That it's like the movie that nobody wanted anything to do with in a certain point. And that. That nobody, even viewers, if people genuinely out there love it, first of all, the question is and if there are fans out there, no offense, but it's are you okay mentally? But also, and I know there's movies I love too that I get it.
Taxi Driver is a movie that sometimes put on par with
and
that.
I also love Natural Born Killers, even though that movie I think is barely good. It's complicated, but so I get it. I'm being kind of facetious when I say that. I love some movies that are screwed up too, but But
well, one thing out of those three particular movies for me is that De Niro's performance in Taxi Driver is clearly superior to anything else going on in those.
Yeah. But so but it's a movie that we like to grapple with and talk about and think about, and we think it's still a very important movie, if nothing else, and that's why we'll be doing it. So.
Yeah. So again, next week, A Clockwork Orange from Stanley Kubrick, 1971. 1971 in general was a very crazy time.
Had
Dirty Harry also very famously in its
French
own
Connection.
way. Yeah, and both of those movies.
And THX 1138. I mean, very nihilistic.
That was one of the darker particular periods, I think, of the 70s.
And, Last Picture Show, which just turned 50 as well.
Yeah.
So the other day. So
yeah, arguably the best out of all those, I would say.
Yeah. There's a couple 4.5 stars there though.
Oh yeah, Dirty Harry and French Connection. I think certainly are. But before we end this Spooktober Spectacular, we just gotta wrap it up with Drew's Famous, our last little Drew's Famous selection.
Do I need to explain that again
Real quickly.
more time?
One quick.
So Drew's Famous Entertainment, they make these CDs for party music, and they have a group of people called the Hit Crew.
This album that we're pulling from,
it's called Trick or Treat Halloween Music, and it's got a skull on the front. I've seen different types of the way it looks. I've seen some that look like just like a jack-o'-lantern.
But you can tell it's just like supposed to be generic party music you put in at a Halloween party, and people are kind of talking, dancing, having a good time, and that just serves as background noise.
In the past, we have had, in these last few movies, we've had Werewolves of London, we've had King Tut, we've had She's a Bad Mama Jamma, particularly with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it should be reminded. And last week we had Love Potion number 9. So this week, what do we have, Kyle? Our last one.
Ring My Bell, written by Frederick Knight, but performed by Anita Ward. Who I was looking, I'd never really heard of Anita Ward. This is literally her.
This is her song.
One big hit. Yeah.
She rang her bell.
Yep. Ring My Bell. First of all, we were re-listening to this song, which I've heard before, of course, several times.
The Hit Crew version, we have to say.
Why it was put on a Halloween-themed album, I have no idea. If it was like 70s disco, blah, 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 okay, but a Halloween-themed album, Ring My Bell.
Like Disco Inferno's on here, too, but...
Yeah. So, thoughts on Ring My Bell?
I mean, it's a hilarious song. I mean, it's stupid.
How does it relate, do you think, to Carnival of Souls? So, is she begging Herk Harvey to ring her bell, or is Herk Harvey want to ring, or, like... her
bell,
his bell, like what's? I mean,
know.
Play the organ. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that it relates in the fact that there's organs.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't know. We wanted to pick a random one to put us out here. This is a randomly long version of this song. It's like
it is.
Almost 5 minutes long, but we're gonna play the whole thing.
Oh yeah,
so
you can best believe it.
So happy Halloween. This should be the weekend of Halloween if you're listening to this originally. So have a safe one.
Yeah, be safe out there.
And kind of glad that we're getting through this. We can get to Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up.
Yeah, I do really love Halloween, but I really love Thanksgiving and Christmas a little even more myself personally.
What's funny is that we'll actually probably be watching A Clockwork Orange on Halloween, so that'll be kind of funny. So actually, because we always do these a week ahead, so that's kind of funny. But oh well.
There you go. So this is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless, and hey, go ring that bell a little bit for you.
Go ring that bell. Go see Dune.
Go see Dune. Go pay tribute to Herk Harvey.
And see Dune.
And Spicy. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So nice. Goodbye.